Coming in at number 10 is Kang the Conqueror. Kang is a little bit of an interesting pick for this list, as he totally can be stopped and has been multiple times. Thanks to the advanced time period he comes from though, Nathaniel Richards has an increased lifespan, making him look 40 when he's actually 7 years old. That's fine, that doesn't make him unstoppable. What makes him unstoppable is a couple of things. For starters, as most people know, Kang has a huge relationship with time. A version of this guy exists at almost all moments of the time stream, and not just one version of him, as there have been Kangs from different universes that have shown up as well. So not only can Nathaniel Richards show up at any point in the time stream in any of his numerous identities that all have their own long history, but his alternate universe versions are almost always set to make an appearance in his place. And then, on top of that, until recently, Nathaniel had the ability to transfer his consciousness to another body when he passed away. Nathaniel, Ramatut, Iron Lad, Kid Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Immortus himself, Mr. Griffin, He Who Remains, whatever you want to call him, Kang the Conqueror is pretty much unstoppable. Number 9. Galactus. The being formerly known as Galen of the planet Ta lived before the modern cosmos in the previous cosmos. Galen gestated with the sentience of the universe for billions of years, transforming into the devourer of worlds, finding sustenance by ingesting entire planets, preferably those with living sentient beings that have much more energy for him to harness. Now when Galactus destroys and consumes a planet, he is sort of bringing balance to the universe, kind of like how life is given and taken away every day on Earth, which makes him an essential part of the universe. He's known for the destruction of the Skrull Empire and has attempted to devour the Earth so many freaking times. And I guess other planets for that matter too, or whatever. Galactus is also famous for his heralds such as Silver Surfer and the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and so many others. And while they are all powerful beings themselves, usually even before they gain the herald power boost, they don't hold a candle to Galactus himself. His only caveat is that Galactus's power depends on his planet's consumption. So a weakened Galactus has been taken out before, but if he eats like 4 or more planets or something, he's been able to defeat multiple mad celestials all by himself. He's powered by food, and I think pretty much all of us can understand that. Coming in at number 8, Abraxas. Abraxas is the polar opposite of the cosmic entity Eternity. So, being the opposite of Eternity, his whole reason for existing is to destroy all of the multiverse, which, I'll be honest, there are a few different characters in Marvel who exist for that reason, and funnily enough, a bunch of them are on this list. Abraxas is tied to Galactus too, because when Galactus would consume a planet, it would keep Abraxas in check. So, when Galactus is taken off the board in Galactus the Devourer, Abraxas is released and begins his path of ultimate destruction. As a cosmic entity, Abraxas' powers are essentially limitless, and his whole existence is kind of important to the universe, which means he can't really be taken out like a normal villain. So, how the heck do the heroes come out on top against this guy? Well, in Fantastic Four number 48 to 50, we learned of an incredibly powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier. It was used back then to threaten Galactus and stop him from destroying our Earth. Now the heroes, specifically Reed Richards, ended up using the Ultimate Nullifier to essentially rewrite reality, destroying reality and remaking it so that Abraxas just never existed. That's the route we had to go to here. Kinda makes you wonder why Marvel would even write such a powerful villain in the first place, but Number 7. The Void. Bob Reynolds was granted the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns after consuming the Golden Century Serum, which was a much more potent offshoot of the original Super Soldier Serum. He has photokinetic-based powers fueled by the sun itself that include molecular manipulation, immortality, insane super strength, speed, invulnerability, stamina, agility, reflexes, and senses, flight, teleportation, energy absorption and blasts, psionic abilities, and even reality warping abilities within a small area. He used his powers for the greater good of all, and he was the example of what a hero should be. He had connections to Iron Man, was active during the years just prior to the Fantastic Four's emergence. He became a role model for Spider-Man as well as an ally to the X-Men and equal to Reed Richards and a friend to the Hulk. The thing about the Sentry is that he's accompanied by a dark persona called the Void. The Void has all the same abilities plus seemingly even more. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1,000,000 people and almost destroyed Manhattan. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it wasn't even permanent. Now later on, in the Siege event, Norman Osborn used the Sentry to attack Asgard, but this accidentally unleashed the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. Now this did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off to destroy the universe. The Sentry is basically a god, and the Void is this god's devil. They may be adding the Sentry to the MCU soon, but I seriously doubt they will make this character or his opposite as powerful as they are in the comics. Number 6. Null. Null is the literal eldritch god of all symbiotes. He's their creator. Null existed before the current version of the universe ever even came to be, in the black void of nothingness. One of his very first acts after he was awoken by the light created by the foundation of the universe was creating the all-black Necrosword. This was the very first symbiote, and it was immensely powerful. Using it, Null was able to slice the head clean off of a Celestial. For this insane feat of power, he was banished to a void where he worked more and more on the sword, and eventually he broke free and went out into the universe with the intent of wiping out various gods until he was defeated and he lost the sword to Gore the God Butcher. And if we want to talk about villains who should have been more powerful in the MCU, he is top of the list. Null then goes on to make more and more symbiotes who all share a hive mind under the control of Null. They eventually rebel and imprison Null inside the symbiote homeworld Clintar, but he is one of the strongest villains Marvel Comics has ever shown us. He faced off against all the Earth's heroes and nearly won. He has awoken, enslaved, and controlled Celestials, and even defeated the Sentry, ripping him in half and absorbing the Void. The only thing that defeated him was Eddie Brock's Venom wielding the Unit Power, aka Captain Universe, the protector of the universe, and the opposite to everything that Null represents. Number 5. Molecule Man. While attempting to fix an atomic-powered device, a 1,000,000,000,000 accident occurred, bombarding Owen Reese with radiation and transforming his body. Now, this man, Owen Reese, was the most powerful being in the entire multiverse. The accident also caused a minuscule hole between Earth's dimension and another, allowing the being who would eventually become known as the Beyonder to become aware of a universe teeming with life, which would lead to the events of the first and eventually second Secret Wars. Now, Uatu the Watcher, who used to never become involved in the events of Earth, sensed the Molecule Man and the danger that he posed. He contacted the Fantastic Four, warned them of the threat, transported them to face him, and the Fantastic Four couldn't do a damn thing to the Molecule Man, until Mr. Fantastic was able to deduce that the Molecule Man could not alter the molecules of living things. But that wasn't even a real limitation of the Molecule Man. That was just a subconscious limitation that the Molecule Man put on himself. The kicker is that, in reality, Reese's accident was caused by the Beyonders themselves. They created the Molecule Man as a singularity in every reality to basically use the villain as a device that would destroy its universe. The purpose of their experiment was to eventually destroy all the Molecule Men at the same time just to see what would happen, which was a key part of the latest Secret Wars event. But Molecule Man, being used by Dr. Doom and eventually Reed Richards, was able to rebirth the entire cosmos. Could it work in the MCU? Sure, it could, but the character would just be a plot device. I doubt they would actually use him as an actual villain. Number 4. Abraxas. Abraxas is the polar opposite of the cosmic entity Eternity. This means his whole reason for existing is to destroy all of the multiverse, which, I'll be honest, there are a few different characters in Marvel Comics who exist for that reason, and funnily enough, a bunch of them are on this list. But Abraxas is also tied to the incredibly unstoppable cosmic entity Galactus. Whenever Galactus would consume a planet, it would keep Abraxas in check. So, when Galactus was destroyed in a story called Galactus the Devourer, Abraxas was released and begins his path of ultimate destruction. As a cosmic entity, Abraxas's powers are essentially limitless, and his whole existence is kind of important to the universe, which means he can't really be taken out like a normal villain can. So the question of how he was defeated is kind of important. In Fantastic Four number 48 to number 50, we learned of an incredibly powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier. It was used back then to threaten Galactus and stop him from destroying the Earth. Reed Richards ended up using the Ultimate Nullifier to essentially rewrite reality, remaking it so that Abraxas just never existed. Abraxas is so unstoppable that we essentially needed a deus ex machina just to defeat him. I think that if he was in the MCU, that's probably the only way they could make the story work, but I think it would basically break the whole MCU for them to do it. Number 3. Ladypool. Wanda Wilson is the Deadpool of Earth 3010. But since she is one of a very few female Deadpools, she naturally is titled Ladypool. Lady Deadpool joined the side of a group of rebels fighting against loyalists in the United States in her own universe, that were led by Ladypool's nemesis, General America. Yes, that's Captain America, but a general. According to Wanda, the fight started when fascists in the federal government started to impose their will on the people. As a result, a schism in Congress occurred, generals took sides, and states declared independence, which led to the current predicament. Eventually, she is assisted by 616 Deadpool, and she ends up becoming a main part of the good Deadpool Corps, and eventually she becomes the leader of that group, sacrificing herself and the Corps' ship in a fight against the evil Deadpool Corps and Galactus Pool. Number 2. Ultimate Deadpool. The Ultimate Universe has a lot of fresh takes on 616 heroes, but Deadpool got some rather unique changes that I'm not sure how I feel about, honestly. It's giving me strong X-Men Origins Wolverine vibes, which came out 3 years after this comic, so I'm not saying this comic inspired whatever they did to Deadpool in that movie, but I can't say that it didn't. Just saying, pointing that out. The Ultimate Marvel version of Deadpool was a sergeant in the military named Wade Wilson. He's grim, he's angry, he's way too serious, and he's also an incredibly racist mutant hater. Oh, he was also a cyborg with incredible strength, retained his signature healing factor, and instead of just being disfigured, he had no skin at all, and is missing parts of his skull. So his head instead is encased in a clear plastic helmet for everyone to see. Yay! Deadpool leads the Reavers, who are also pretty horrible in trying to take out prominent mutants, but on live television, like it was for sport or something. Thankfully, Ultimate Deadpool was taken off of the board by 616 Deadpool and Deadpool Kills Deadpool in 2013. Deadpool. Deadpool, Deadpool, Deadpool. Number 1. Dreadpool. In the Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe storyline, Deathpool murders every single superhero there is in his quest to end all of creation. Deathpool even rises against the divine powers that created the Marvel Universe, meaning the literal writers, and he won. We're introduced to this character being dragged to Psycho Man by the X-Men in an attempt to cure Wade of his insanity. Psycho Man's procedure silenced all the voices in Deadpool's head, but brought out a new one, the Ultimate Murderer. This voice is aware of himself being a fictional character and is adamantly convinced that his only salvation is to kill everything there is. Dreadpool went on a complete killing spree, ending the lives of the X-Men, the Avengers, Dr. Doom, Taskmaster, Thanos, and Galactus, but he didn't stop there. The Ultimate Murderer persona had gone so far that he decided to eradicate other versions of himself, namely the 616 Deadpool. Dreadpool and Deadpool each made their own Deadpool cores, assembled from alternate Deadpools throughout the multiverse, and they went head to head. But you can read that for yourself. Coming in at number 10 is Dark Claw. So, what happens if you take Logan Howlett and Bruce Wayne and just mash them up together? You subtract Robbins, add some Canada, carry the two, and you'll find you get Logan Wayne. This awesome character is from the amalgam universe of Earth 9602. Obviously, Bruce Wayne has no actual powers of his own unless you count his undeniable skill, so most of the abilities belonging to Logan Wayne come from his Wolverine half. A massively powerful regenerative healing factor, slowed aging, superhuman senses, plus his healing factor and adamantium skeleton allow him to have a degree of super strength. But thanks to his Wayne half of things, Dark Claw is a master detective and master of martial arts, stealth, acrobatics, and intimidation. After he witnessed the passing of his parents, Logan went to live with his uncle up in Alberta, Canada, who then also lost his life to poachers. So yes, this is still as dark as both Bruce and Logan's backstories. He then went to kick it with some nuns and then joined up with the Canadian Air Force. Now after this, at some point, he joined the Weapon X program and learned of his mutation and gained his claws alongside his incredibly dangerous rival, Creed H. Quinn, who would become a saber-toothed Joker hybrid named Hyena. Logan Wayne would go back to New Gotham City, where he decided to avenge his parents' and uncle's deaths by donning the costume and name of Dark Claw. Number 9. Sideburns. When Galactica, the daughter of Galactus, is looking for her next meal and issue 1 of her self-titled comic, she finds Earth, a lovely little morsel of a planet teeming with scrumptious life. But while looking at her dinner, she happens to notice Wolverine, a mutant who can seemingly regenerate from anything. I mean, there's also Deadpool, but whatever. Realizing his mutant regenerative abilities, she formulates an idea of using a bit of his harvested DNA with a bit of celestial power to create Sideburns, the regenerating planet. A planet-sized Wolverine that would grow back after each meal, giving the world devourer billions and billions of years of meals. Unfortunately, she just as quickly realizes that a planet made up of Canadian mutant DNA like this, prone to drinking beer over anything else, and with predilection to being feral, would be highly unstable. Unfortunate, because I'd love to see this guy floating around through the galaxy. Number 8. House of M. Wolverine. Now, to be clear, technically this version of Wolverine is just regular old 616 Wolverine, since unlike other characters in this Scarlet Witch created reality, Wolverine retains all of his old memories, which gives him a distinct advantage in this world. But outside of his story-serving memories, before he regains those memories, this Wolverine was a member of Magneto's Red Guard, which saw him have additional training as a S.H.I.E.L.D. operative, adding extra skill to a character who is hard to even scratch on a villain's best day. Also, in this reality, Logan has himself a little relationship with Mystique, unlike his alternates who seem to always be pining after Jean Grey. Is this an advantage over regular Wolverine? Depends on your taste. Number 7. Vampire Wolverine. In What If number 24, thanks to his healing factor, Wolverine is actually immune to being turned into a vampire from just a regular old bite, which allows him to be the best one suited to bring down the threat of vampires themselves. But when he finally takes down Dracula, he actually decides to have a little snack on the dead vampire, which does turn the mutant into not just a vampire, but the new Vampire King. The fact that Vampire Wolverine is a vampire means that his strength and speed are enhanced to vampiric levels. On top of that, he has an evil personality that is fueled by the character's desire to drain the blood of the living. Now couple that with his already somewhat feral personality, his healing factor, adamantium skeleton, and the vampire trait of immortality, and he is very dangerous compared to the usual Wolverine. Number 6. Ultimate Wolverine. I'm gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear explosion. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men. Although, it may have only been just because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30 years old, which is a little uncomfortable.
Number 5. X-Man. I mean, when you have the power of someone like X-Man, it's impossible for you to not be considered unstoppable. X-Man is a reality warping mutant and superhero. He's extremely powerful when it comes to telepathic abilities and telekinetic abilities. Although he isn't always operating on the side of, straight up good, with his morals sometimes getting a little wonky, I would say, like when he thought that, removing love from the world would somehow fix it. At the end of the day, he is generally trying to be a hero and do what he thinks is best. Nate Gray, as he's known, is not from the main continuity, but actually hails from the reality of Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse, and then he kinda got sucked into the main continuity. In the AOA reality, which stands for Age of Apocalypse respectively, he was created by that world's version of Mr. Sinister, known simply there as Sinister. However, Gray would escape Sinister and end up being raised by mutant hero and one of my fave mutants in general, Forge. So, that Gray in general is going to act as a hero because he was raised by one of the best heroes, I'd say. When he did decide to take control of the world, becoming its god and shaping it into what he thought it should be, he was only threatened by basically all of mutant kind coming together to try and stop him. And even then, they failed. That was the only threat that he had, and he was like, well, dealt with that. Of course, while this all sounds kinda evil, becoming basically a tyrant and kinda conquering the world, this was actually done by Nate to fix the world, so it's not as bad as it sounds, really. He was like, look, I'm gonna die soon, and I feel like if I'm gonna die, I need to fix everything. So here I go, I'm gonna try to fix it. And then people were like, yeah, we don't really like when you try to just fix things, Nate. And he was like, okay, well, fair enough, fair enough. Number 4, Deadpool. Deadpool is so unstoppable, it's annoying. He has actively destroyed the Marvel universe before, killing everyone in it. He was so determined to escape a world that he no longer believed was real. Deadpool is also an immortal being thanks to his healing factor, and for a while thanks to the curse that Thanos put on him. Yeah, that's a true story. Deadpool was getting a little too cozy with death, and Thanos did not like that. That's because Thanos has always had a thing for Mistress Death, and is always trying to win her favor so that they can one day be together. Maybe one day. Thanos has an unhealthy obsession with death, I would say. So Thanos, when his potential future relationship status was threatened, decided to curse Deadpool so that he couldn't die, thereby preventing him ending up with death and keeping the two of them apart. Deadpool for a while was human, and it was during this time that Wade Wilson became a lot more squishy, and I suppose stoppable. But even then, he didn't end up dying, but instead would be reverted back to getting his powers, going from handsome mortal Wade Wilson back to kinda ugly, unkillable Wade Wilson. Oh my gosh. When are we getting the Immortal Deadpool book, I wonder? That could be a whole book. Someone write that. Immortal Deadpool. Number 3, Magneto. I mean, Magneto literally kept himself alive through sheer willpower and massive control of his powers. I think that means he deserves his spot on this list. And for those who might think, yeah, but is Magneto a hero, Amanda? I would say that you could argue for him being on either side, really, hero and villain. Magneto throughout most of modern comics has been villain and hero, but he also kept his blood pumping without a heart to face off against Uranos, which was a heroic feat. So even if you perhaps disagree with my categorization of him on this list, I think you at least have to give him some hero props for doing that, and perhaps at least, you know, I would say a good amount of hero points. Hero points that Magneto has truthfully been racking up over the years, especially recently in the comics. After initially facing Uranos, Magneto was left for dead, which was a mistake on Uranos' part to assume this during the AXE Judgment Day event. As we've learned from Zombieland, you always gotta double tap, aka confirm that kill. It is important, especially if you're facing off against Magneto. Uranos did not follow this rule, assuming Magneto was dead after he took his heart, and as a result, Magneto came back to finish him. Magneto basically used his powers to keep his blood moving throughout his body by controlling the small bits of iron in his bloodstream to basically keep it pumping without having an actual organ to do it for him. Literally heartless Magneto, which sounds terrifying. Later, using all his strength and a power boost from Storm, Magneto was able to defeat the Eternal Villain before he passed away. But I'm sure he'll be back eventually because he is Magneto and he's a pretty great character, so. Number 2, Wolverine. I would say Wolverine is probably one of the most unstoppable heroes that we have over at Marvel Comics. He is a master tracker and is determined when it comes to defeating whoever stands in his way, or when it comes to saving the day. And even when he ends up being brainwashed and used as a weapon, he ends up not letting that stop him, at least not in the main continuity. Although in some of those alternate worlds, he definitely has been brainwashed to the point that he had to be put down. And by Kitty Pryde, no less, in one of them. Ugh, that hurts my heart. That being said, even in alternate worlds where he has become like Lord of the Vampires, he was able and willing to rise up to defeat his fellow evil brethren, even though he knew it would also mean his own death as well, potentially. That's how determined Wolverine is. He's also virtually unkillable. Well, I guess unless you drown him. But even then, Wolverine has fallen into oceans and washed up miles off on another shore unscathed, so for a man that can still be drowned, I mean, he does pretty well to make it out alive of those underwater situations. Number 1, Hulk. I mean, we can't do a list like this and not talk about Hulk, am I right? The Hulk is not just a powerful hero, but he's also a stubborn and determined one. We've seen this shine through not just in his Hulk persona, but also as Bruce Banner before as well, but especially as the Hulk. Let's turn to World War Hulk as an example. In this story, Hulk was shot off planet by the Illuminati and ended up in Sakaar. He not only rose above being a gladiator, helping to lead a rebellion and an uprising, but after Sakaar was destroyed from a ship exploding, Hulk was determined to get back at those who had sent him there in the first place, and then later seemingly ruined his happiness, even though that isn't quite what happened, but that's what the Hulk thought happened, and that's all that really matters. He returns to Earth to get revenge on the Illuminati, and he proves just how deadly he can be. It also goes to show us why you really do not want to make the Hulk angry, because he might just squash you like a bug. He threatens the lives of some of the greatest heroes. When it comes to confronting even Professor X, Hulk manages to take on the mutants who come to his aid, and single-handedly does so, not being defeated by a physical show of power, but instead kinda by a speech about how the mutants, don't really deserve his ire. When it comes to Bruce Banner, we've seen his unstoppable nature as is showcased in the recent Hulk series by Donny Cates and Ryan Ottley, where Bruce turns Hulk's body into his own spaceship, and his mind into the ship's engine, with Bruce remaining in control at the helm, which is pretty crazy. Also, Bruce kinda took on Thor in a fight at one point and was like, look, I might be Bruce Banner, but give me all the information about how the Hulk fights. I'm a smart guy and I can use that knowledge to basically face off with the Hulk.
Coming in at number 10 is Captain America. No, Captain America is not near the top of the power hierarchy of Avenger heroes. Not by a long shot. But it's not his power that makes him unstoppable. It's his willpower. Captain America just never gives up or backs down when he believes in what he is fighting for. This is one of the big reasons that Steve Rogers has been the leading man of the Avengers. That and his genius tactical mind and his leadership skills. Almost all the Marvel heroes and even some of the Marvel villains will shut up and listen when Captain America speaks, even when those heroes and villains are leagues and bounds above Steve in terms of their power. In addition to all that, Captain America is one of the longest lasting and most popular of the Marvel heroes, and that fact also lends him some points in the unstoppability factor on the publishing side of Marvel heroes. But on top of all of that, Captain America is one hell of a fighter and is incredibly tough with his super soldier serum, bringing him to the very tippy top of the human conditioning and making him a physically perfect human, which has allowed him to withstand some pretty brutal attacks, being frozen in ice for decades, and has virtually stopped his aging. And at number 9 is Spider-Man. Just like Captain America, Spider-Man has the absolute god level of power known as popularity. He is essentially the face of Marvel Comics, and almost everyone who just knows of comic books knows of Spider-Man. Sure, Spider-Man has been defeated and even lost his life, like how he is technically currently not alive, but he always comes back, and there is a very low possibility that he will ever be brought down for good. Plus, now we have Miles Morales as well, who is going to share this spot on the list, even if he's got a few abilities that Peter doesn't have. Spider-Man has got more than popularity though. He is also very inspiring, actually really strong, and incredibly intelligent. He is seen and respected as one of the most righteous and brave heroes around, and his heroic attitude, sense of responsibility, almost perfect moral compass, and quick wit make him beloved by not only fans but other heroes and even some villains. But above all of that, it's his willpower that I think makes him truly unstoppable. Even in the face of certain deaths, Spider-Man will always get back to his feet, which has allowed him to use his incredible abilities to perform truly incredible feats. Speaking of his powers, Spider-Man possesses the proportional powers of a spider, but he's done things that even a human-sized spider would not be able to do, and his spider sense gives him an edge in battle, and that combined with his other abilities has made him next to unstoppable. And at number 8 is Luke Cage. Criminal turned unstoppable superhero is quite the feat, but Luke Cage handles that with grace, becoming a pillar of his community and even eventually becoming mayor of New York itself. Whenever I think of Luke Cage, the word unstoppable is what actually comes to mind. I just think of him as this big brick wall just standing in the way of anyone who would try to harm another person. Luke went through a super soldier experiment known as the Burstein process, which increased his cellular regeneration rate. This means that Luke was given a level of super strength that, with training and experience, has made him strong enough to lift 50 tons. But there have been times where he exceeded this, and his strength lets him perform thunderclaps, leap incredible distances, and he's even been able to grab onto the back of an aeroplane and force it to come to a complete stop. Alongside his strength, he was obviously given superhuman stamina to match, but what most know him for is his nigh invulnerability. Luke's skin, muscles, and bone tissue is about as hard as titanium steel, making him basically immune to bullets and blades. He can withstand hits of around 1 ton and blasts of 150 pounds of TNT, but those numbers wax and wane depending on the story. He has taken hits from people far stronger than himself and survived falls from 90 stories. If Peter Parker is the heart of New York City, Luke Cage is the bulwark. And at number 7 is Wolverine. Of course, an overly aggressive and angry Canadian will make this list. An angry Canadian is already such a rare occurrence that they have to be pretty strong, and Wolverine definitely is. Most people are well aware of Wolverine's abilities thanks to Hugh Jackman, but I am honor bound to explain them anyways. There are two things that make Wolverine practically unstoppable. The first would be his adamantium lace skeleton and by extension, his claws. While not a natural occurrence, Wolverine was subjected to the Weapon X program, and for him, he was given the adamantium which bonded to his skeleton, infusing it with his bones, which makes them virtually unbreakable. It also makes his claws razor sharp and gives him added weight and velocity when throwing punches and kicks. Now, if someone were to ever break his bones, which is pretty much impossible, it wouldn't really matter because one of his natural mutations is a healing factor that is only outmatched by a few other characters in the Marvel Universe. His healing factor has allowed him to survive a nuclear explosion, being completely crushed by a steamroller, having his heart torn out, brutal and bloody fights with Sabretooth. He has even recovered from a single drop of blood, but he was being powered up at that time. His skeleton and his healing factor are just compounded by incredible senses, superhuman attributes, and general tough guy attitude to make him a pretty unstoppable member of the Avengers and more. In at number 6 is Ghost Rider. Everybody loves Ghost Rider. Doesn't matter who it is, a flaming skull and a flaming mount is just always cool. But not only is he really cool, he's quite a hardy fella. He is essentially impervious to almost all forms of normal damage, or the damage he has sustained, like having his head completely obliterated, didn't actually matter since he just instantly reformed it and didn't even feel it. The Ghost Rider has tanked hits from the Hulk on multiple different occasions and was one of the main heroes called in when Hulk returned for his vengeance on the Illuminati. Since his body becomes a flaming skeleton, most projectiles just pass straight through him or bounce off of his incredibly strong bones. The only things that have ever been shown to actually hurt him are heaven-forged or blessed weapons. Also, because of the divine or demonic energies that empower him, he can basically feel no fatigue or pain of any kind, and if anything were to actually damage him, he can recover from his injuries insanely quickly, almost instantly. But all that combined with his hellfire, soul, and sim manipulation, demonic magic, fallible penance stare, and other insane abilities makes Ghost Rider someone who most villains, and even heroes, fear even on their best days. Number 5. Death Mask Deadpool. When Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, comes up with a revolutionary new method for dealing with cancer, he removes a tumor from Wade Wilson's head. What I think no one expected was that removing this tumor had the side effect of making Wade's insanity completely disappear. Deadpool suddenly becomes hyper intelligent, and his insanity instead turns him into becoming a super criminal with a super criminal empire. Now going by Death Wish and looking a hell of a lot like Dr. Doom, Wade basically is Dr. Doom, taking his place as King of Latveria and wearing a super sweet death mask armor. He plans to attack the alternate Earth 616 Deadpool, but when he's defeated, he goes and makes a deal with Mephisto to unleash a literal hell on his Earth. Number 4. Captain Universe Pool. In the comic Deadpool v Thanos, in the Patchwork Battle World, Thanos and Deadpool team up to look for Lady Death. Turns out that the entity had been kidnapped by a rival cosmic force, Eternity. And it turns out that Eternity is pretty peeved about being ridiculed and separated by the Infinity Gems and Galactus' hunger and the Annihilation Wave and Death's Embrace. I don't know. The in-betweener comes in to talk some sense into Eternity, but meanwhile Deadpool sees an opportunity and tries freeing Mistress Death, which didn't go so smoothly, and a fight breaks out. Thanos betrays Deadpool and starts to completely pummel Eternity, a cosmic entity, which makes no sense to me. Deadpool attacks Thanos, who simply throws the Merc with the mouth into Eternity. Now this is where it starts to get wacky, apparently. Inside the cosmic being, Wade meets the Unipower, who bestows that power onto Wade, and boom, enter Captain Universe Deadpool. With his newfound power, he was able to go blow for blow with a death-powered Thanos. Deadpool doesn't technically win, but Death is able to see the error of her ways, and she takes back her power from Thanos, causing Grimace to explode. Nice. Number 3. Weapon Omega. After the Mutant Legion went back in time and accidentally took the life of his pops, Xavier, Apocalypse came out of hibernation 10 years too early and took over control of the United States. Enter the Age of Apocalypse storyline. The Logan of Age of Apocalypse is extremely ferocious and he goes by the name Weapon X. He has only one hand after having it blasted off by Cyclops, but his claws still pop through the nub, which is kind of alarming. He and Jean Grey set off a apart from the X-Men to save mutants and stop Apocalypse, but Weapon X eventually becomes the new Apocalypse, gaining his celestial and mutant powers to try and stop aliens from destroying the population of Earth. Yes, it's nuts, but I suggest you check out this story because it's super cool. Number 2, General James Howlett. In the second volume of Extreme X-Men, joining a team of multi-dimensional mutants that hunt down evil Xaviers across many dimensions is a much different version of Wolverine. Hailing from the reality of Earth 12025, this version of our feral mutant is the Governor General of the Dominion of Canada and Viceroy of Her Majesty's Expedition to Shangri-La. He is like a version of Wolverine who is also mixed with President Theodore Roosevelt but still Canadian. General James Howlett is an adventurer and hero alongside his partner and lover, the demigod Hercules, or Heracles if you prefer and want to get smarmy in the comments. These two shared a love that was built after years and years of working together, and their bond was so strong that Herc gave James a super cool upgrade in the form of a skeleton made of adamantine, which is a godly golden metal even stronger than adamantium, making Wolverine completely indestructible and immune to telepathic attacks. Unfortunately, due to the god on mortal nature of the relationship, the Greek gods banished the pair to Tartarus, where they fight hordes and hordes of lost and damned souls for like 4 years. His penchant for big booms and affinity for political service make him a fun take on this character, and the beard? Oh, it's classic. And in at number 1 is Phoenix Logan. The Phoenix Force embodies life in the Marvel Universe. It is incredibly powerful, and when it chooses a host, that being becomes a force to be reckoned with, which is funny how it always seems to happen to characters who are already pretty damn unstoppable by themselves. Old Man Phoenix is an alternate reality version of Wolverine from Earth 14112, which features a story that is actually revolved around Old King Thor. Now, Wolverine's past resembles his Earth 616 counterpart, but it's a little different, because after Loki destroyed everyone on Earth, including Wolverine, the Phoenix Force chose Wolverine as its avatar, resurrected him, and granted him its powers. So what we have here is Wolverine's regenerative healing factor, retractable adamantium claws, and enhanced senses combined with the Phoenix's psionic powers, cosmic pyrokinesis, and flight. These factors come together to make him one of the most powerful entities in his universe, even more powerful than old King Thor himself.
Number 10, the Kingpin. The way that the Ultimate Universe handles Wilson Fisk is pretty close to how he is in the main 616 universe. He is a kingpin of crime who uses fear and money to avoid the consequences of his criminal actions. His activities are an open secret, but no one can get enough evidence together to actually stop him. Sure, he loses some fights over the course of his time in the comics, but he is unstoppable in a much more realistic and kind of depressing way because of the corruption that he has sown into the city. After obtaining a magical Egyptian relic known as the Zodiac Key, he found that without even having to use the item, it caused enough fear that he could run the city's crime almost unopposed. In a move that is an undeniable win on Fisk's part, he bought the merchandise rights to Spider-Man's likeness, meaning that he was making massive amounts of money off of his enemy. He was eventually arrested after trying to have the Ultimate Moon Knight killed, but when the ultimatum wave washed away much of New York, all of the records of his crime were destroyed in the disaster, and he was able to go free. He was permanently stopped when he was thrown out of a window by Mysterio, though. Number 9, Sabretooth. Earth 1610's Victor Creed is quite similar to the original version, with him being a bit of a psycho with claws, heightened senses, and a healing factor. He believed that humans were more cruel than less evolved animals, and therefore, mutants should be even worse. He became a ruthless killer who delighted in causing his victims as much pain as possible before he was eventually recruited to the Weapon X program. After Wolverine left the program, Sabretooth was given similar, though more extensive, adamantium upgrades, and he was sent to retrieve Wolverine. From that point on in his history, Sabretooth came into frequent conflict with the X-Men, the Ultimates, and various random heroes of the Ultimate Universe. He soon joined the ultimate version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the Brotherhood of Mutant Superiority, being a consistent thorn in Wolverine's side. Sabretooth makes this list despite the fact that he is frequently apprehended or defeated because of his incredible healing factor. He has been shot, stabbed, and even decapitated, and yet he always comes back. So, Though he can be defeated, he can only ever be stopped on a temporary basis. Number 8. Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock's origin is pretty much the same as his original. He gets in a lab accident that makes him able to control his metal arms telepathically, and he uses those arms to do crime. However, he is different from the classic Ock in a few ways. This version of Octavius is so linked to his arms that he can control them even when he is separated from them, such as in Ultimate Spider-Man number 54, when he summoned his arms with his mind and used them to escape prison. After Spider-Man defeated him again, Nick Fury had Ock's arms destroyed in molten steel, thinking that would stop Ock once and for all. But we found out that there was another difference between this Ock and the original. He was actually a mutant, with powers similar to Magneto's. He hadn't been controlling the arms, he had been controlling the metal in the arms. He then used this mutant ability to cause metal in the building to form together new arms for himself, and he fought Spider-Man and Spider-Woman in a cyclone of flying shards of metal. So, while the old Ock could be stopped by removing his arms, this Ock has way more ways to come back from a loss, and can't be stopped for long. That is, until Green Goblin beat him to death. But hey, that's why he's so low on the list.
Number 7. MODOK from Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. This version of MODOK also has an acronymic name that stands instead for Mental Organism Designed Only for Conquest. The acronym was likely changed for his name in this case because he appears in an animated show intended for general audiences, and Marvel therefore probably didn't want to go with the more traditional K for killing at the end because, you know, children, while still wanting MODOK though to be fearsome here. Instead of just focusing on, C for computing with C for, conquesting. This animated version of the character is pretty powerful in regards to what he can do. Not only is he a super genius who is said to rival even some of Marvel's greatest minds such as Reed Richards and Doctor Doom, but he can also fire deadly psionic bolts as well as straight up control minds. So, pretty crazy. Number 6. BRODOK. BRODOK is technically another version of another character on our list. BRODOK was created during a period in MODOK's life when they wanted to reinvent themselves by reforming. To do this, MODOK decided to work on his own image, his outer image, by building a new, more muscular, humanoid, and I'm sure what he thought was a more desirable form. In this new body, he took the name of BRODOK, which stands for Bio-Robotic Organism Designed Overwhelmingly for Kissing. However, after he was rejected, no kissing for BRODOK, he turned to the side of villainy once more, transforming those who had rejected him into monsters and causing the West Coast Revengers to reform in order to take him down. During MODOK's time as BRODOK, the capability to feel love was also added into his programming. So this is basically like an already powerful alternate version of MODOK, but with the addition of being able to love and also muscles. Number 5. MODOK, Father of Maestro. This version of MODOK could be considered more powerful considering that he's kind of the main one responsible for the creation of Maestro. One of the most powerful versions of the Hulk to have ever existed. This version of George Charlton hails from the alternate future belonging to Earth 9200. Here, the world is destroyed by a nuclear attack, and MODOK and AIM end up being the organization to help attempt to save the human race, or what's left of it, by kidnapping those who were successfully mutated by radiation. The hope is to one day rebuild civilization using these people that they've kidnapped. One of these people that they kidnap is of course the Hulk. Being that the Hulk is so strong and, well, pretty unruly, they keep him in stasis in a virtual reality program. However, eventually this VR program begins to fall apart as time goes on, and Hulk comes out of stasis. While MODOK explains what happened and why AIM kept him in stasis, asking now for Hulk's help in rebuilding society, the Hulk actually rejects MODOK's pleas, instead deciding to venture out on his own to explore what is left of the world and eventually of course becoming Maestro. MODOK would end up later being killed by Maestro when he attacked AIM's headquarters, but not before MODOK was able to free the Abomination, updating him on the situation before setting him free to get revenge for MODOK on Maestro. Number 4. MODOK Superior. This MODOK is an alternate in the sense that he is a clone. He hails from the reality still of Earth 616, the main reality. He was created from a clone brain of George Charlton himself, but given a completely new body and a new personality. This version of MODOK would end up as a member of Intelligentsia and would surprisingly temporarily forge an alliance with S.H.I.E.L.D. At one point he almost betrayed S.H.I.E.L.D. and enacted a plan to destroy them before he realized that he was actually in love with Maria Hill, which prevented him from following through with said plan and resulted resulted in him ultimately leaving S.H.I.E.L.D. This version of MODOK would continue down a path for good and would eventually set his sights on saving the world rather than destroying it, becoming a hero. He would temporarily control Ultimo's body, becoming Ultimodok. Although for a good while MODOK Superior had acted as a hero, he would return to the side of evil and more recently has even been spotted in the X-Men comics where he attacked a cruise ship. Later he ended up being rescued and recruited by Orcus as a contractor. MODOK's extremely intelligent and computational mind grants him the ability to basically see into probable futures. He also is considered to be tougher than the original MODOK as he doesn't have as many nerves, so he's not as capable of feeling pain. This version of MODOK was also the one who for a time lived as BRODOK, and he's kind of become like the main MODOK I think now, but still, you know, he wasn't the original MODOK, so I feel like we can count him. MODOK Superior. Number 3. Stop motion MODOK. Probably one of my favorite versions of the character comes to us from Marvel's MODOK, a short-lived stop motion animated series that only got one season sadly, despite it being a strangely amazing series, who honestly, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. I don't really spoil anything in this point, I'm just gonna tell you about it a little bit. In the show, Patton Oswalt voices MODOK, who starts off season 1 as the head of AIM before being tricked basically out of his position as he begins to go through a midlife crisis with his family, with even his wife, Jodie, seemingly turning on him and asking for a divorce. Despite the trials and tribulations that MODOK goes up against, he perseveres, and it is for his resilience that I feel like he also deserves a spot on our list, despite his many failings throughout the show. And honestly, even despite those many failings, MODOK still manages, I will say, to end up on top in many ways, although often at the cost of his own and others' happiness. This version of MODOK also seems to have the actual family that MODOK Superior saw in a vision. However, this family wasn't real for MODOK Superior, who after learning that they didn't exist, sought to basically create his own version. Whereas for this version of MODOK, they're just his family and they're real and they do exist. Number 2. Baby MODOK. These baby MODOKs might actually be some of the most powerful ones in existence, and if they put their little MODOK minds to it, possibly the most unstoppable. And while they haven't accomplished too much in the comics, they do have reality warping powers when they work together, which honestly, that's pretty crazy. They made their first appearance in Miss Marvel issue number 39 during Dark Reign, where Miss Marvel was actually Karla Sofin, aka Moonstone. They also appeared and helped Carol Danvers' Miss Marvel when she returned in issue number 45 of the series. While the baby MODOKs, or storytellers as they were also known, worked for AIM as part of their Project Storyteller, having inherited their powers from their elder brother Gavin, aka the character known as Storyteller, these little MODOKs also were reaching out in the hopes of breaking free from AIM. As Gavin had been freed by the heroic Miss Marvel, they attempted to contact the hero, but instead their call was answered by Karla Sofin, who of course was impersonating Miss Marvel at the time on Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. Number 1. MODOK, Ruler of the World. This version of MODOK hails from an alternate reality seen in Fall of the Hulk's Red Hulk issue number 4. Here, on Earth 1064, the intelligentsia succeeded in their plans to conquer the world. As a result, MODOK is one of the rulers of the planet and even ends up getting himself a new human body, although his face still looks super weirdly scrunched up, I gotta say. He also ended up making Dr. Doom his fool. That's how powerful this version of the villain is. This version of MODOK exists in a vision of the future, where intelligentsia also seem to bring advancement and world peace to Earth the world over with their rule. At least, that seems to be what's implied here. Number 10. Emperor Marco Ragnos. Marco Ragnos is a pretty spooky looking Sith Lord and Emperor. He battled Sith Lord Simus to become the new ruler of the Sith Empire, and take for himself the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. In his battle against Simus, he defeated him by separating his head from his body. Ragnos was a manipulative sort as Emperor and managed to hold on to his rule for hundreds of years by pitting his rivals against one another, thereby eliminating them as threats to his own rule. Even after his death, Ragnos' presence was felt, and he reappeared as a Force Ghost, informing those who fought over his position that only the most worthy would succeed him. Millennia later, an attempt was actually made to even resurrect Ragnos using energy pulled from the Force through various Force nexuses found throughout the galaxy, and this attempt actually almost succeeded. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you think to yourself, man, I wish they did more Star Wars content, guess what? We have have done some of that. You can go check out our Star Wars playlist for even more. Number 9. Savage Opress. Savage Opress is an interesting figure. He first appeared in Star Wars The Clone Wars. He is the younger brother of Darth Maul, who, like his brother, would also become a Sith Lord. However, he was also a Night Brother as well on his home world. As a Night Brother, he was chosen by Asajj Ventress to become her mate, pledging himself fully to her, and being bent by the Night Sisters' magics to obey her. To prove his loyalty to her, he even murdered his own brother. Not Darth Maul, of course, but instead his brother Farrell. Eventually, Opress would escape Ventress' control, breaking the spell that the Night Sisters had cast over him, and breaking off from both Ventress and his master Count Dooku. He would then go on to join up with Darth Maul, who eventually took him on as his own apprentice. Number 8. Darth Plagueis. Did you ever hear of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. Darth Plagueis was the Sith Master of Darth Sidious, who many of course know more commonly by his other name, Emperor Palpatine. Plagueis himself had an obsession that runs all the way back to actually the creation of the Sith, and in fact could be cited as kind of the reason for the initial split in the Force. He wanted to discover the secret to eternal life, and eventually developed somewhat of an ability to prevent death and create even life. However, this ability would not save him in the end, as his apprentice Darth Sidious would eventually betray him, killing him in his sleep so that he might become the new master, taking Plagueis' power for himself. Plagueis is first mentioned in the prequel film Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Here, Emperor Palpatine tells Anakin the legend of Plagueis as he attempts to kinda lure him to the dark side. Although right after that, Anakin's basically like, I think this guy's a Sith Lord. Here, Emperor Palpatine refers to his former master as Darth Plagueis the Wise. It was likely because of Plagueis' pursuit of knowledge in bioengineering that Palpatine himself was in a fashion able to prolong his own life, although he too would obviously fail to become truly immortal, at least as far as we know. I hope that's where it stays. I hope he's gone. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine Emperor Palpatine just comes up again and we're like, oh my gosh, this guy.
Number 7. Doomsday. In the ancient Kryptonian days, a scientist wanted to create the ultimate life form. He accomplished this by sending a baby onto the planet's surface and waiting for either the elements or the creatures of the planet to, let's say, help the baby buy the farm. He would then take whatever remains were left and clone the baby to create a stronger clone, effectively forcing evolution to create the most brutal and effective creature possible. After decades of this process, Doomsday was born. Doomsday is nearly impossible to defeat, being essentially invulnerable and super strong. If you do manage to hurt him, he has a powerful healing factor that will almost immediately undo the damage. If you manage to kill him, he not only comes back to life, but will be evolved to resist damage from whatever hurt him before. He is an unstoppable force that only gets better at fighting you each time. When he first came to Earth, he was able to tear through the entire Justice League with them barely slowing him down, and the only person on Earth capable of standing up to him was Superman. Superman was eventually able to kill Doomsday, but it took him having to not hold back at all, and even then, the effort killed him in the process as well. Number 6. Parallax. Parallax is a parasitic demon entity that is the embodiment of fear. He spent years traveling the galaxy, causing civilizations to destroy themselves out of paranoia until the Guardians of the Universe trapped Parallax in the Green Lantern's central power battery on the planet Oa for billions of years. This yellow fear demon living in the battery is the reason that for years Green Lanterns were unable to affect anything that was the color yellow. Parallax influenced the mind of Hal Jordan, making him more and more anxious and self-doubting until he was driven mad by the destruction of his home, Coast City. In an effort to try and restore his home, Hal went on a rampage, killing the entire Green Lantern Corps and destroying the central power battery, allowing Parallax to graft onto Hal's soul, causing him to start going by the name Parallax and acting as a villain until he was eventually killed. The Spectre then freed Hal's spirit from the demon. Despite the fact that he can be trapped, Parallax is the embodiment of an emotional concept, fear, and is therefore unable to be killed. Beyond that, he is also able to manipulate reality, being able to create and destroy new planets at will. Number 5. Trigon. Trigon was a regular evil ruler of a planet until one day a group of aliens known as the Divine showed up, hoping to use something called the Great Heart of Darkness to eat his soul and cleanse the planet of evil. This backfired as Trigon absorbed the heart and gained the power of 100 galaxies worth of collected evils. It was at this point that the Divine revealed that they were not a boy band as their name suggested, but were in fact his parents. This family reunion was cut short when Trigon skinned them and wore them like coats. He would go on to have many sons whose mothers he would kill, and one daughter, Raven. Raven would not end up going into the family business, but would instead end up joining the Teen Titans and becoming Trigon's greatest enemy. He has mind control powers, shape-shifting, dimensional travel, the ability to manipulate matter, and telepathy and telekinesis, just to name a few of his powers. He is immortal, having apparently been around since the dawn of time, and nearly invulnerable, having shrugged off blows from Wonder Girl and Superboy, with Superboy even saying that punching Trigon felt like trying to destroy a mountain with a teaspoon. Number 4. Darkseid. After the old gods died in a battle against evil, the planets New Genesis and Apocalypse were born. The latter fell under the control of an evil and tyrannical new god called Darkseid. New Genesis housed the source of all life, the life equation, and Darkseid became obsessed with finding its opposite force, the anti-life equation. He discovered that the anti-life equation was on the planet Earth and began a campaign to conquer the planet, bringing him into constant conflict with the members of the Justice League, particularly Superman. He is all but immortal, invulnerable, and super strong. As if that wasn't bad enough, he is also an incredible tactician with a keen scientific mind who has telepathic powers and the ability to shoot omega beams from his eyes, which he can use to either destroy or teleport his victims, such as when he sent Batman back to caveman times at the end of Final Crisis, essentially turning the Dark Knight into a temporal bomb. Even Superman has trouble going toe-to-toe with this god, whose only weakness is a substance called radium. Number 3. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a fifth-dimensional being who has developed an obsession with Superman and likes to spend his time harassing the Man of Steel and putting him through various ordeals for his own amusement. He can fly, teleport, and create essentially anything he likes with just a thought. He is also a character with cosmic awareness, sometimes speaking directly to the reader as though he is aware of his place in a comic book. He is a relatively benign nuisance most of the time, merely wanting to put Superman through the ringer with his various cosmic pranks, but he is capable of extreme villainy when he wants to be, such as in Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, where he grows bored and decides to become truly evil, manipulating events to kill several of Superman's friends and ruining his life in the process. Mixie is so powerful that even he thinks it's unfair. So, to be a good sport, he gave himself a weakness that makes it so that the only way to stop him is to trick Mr. Mxyzptlk into saying his name backwards, which is of course Kiltipsixum. When you consider that this is a self-imposed weakness, and in theory if he wanted to remove this rule he could at any time, it makes you realize just how unstoppable he really is. Number 2. The Anti-Monitor. When a scientist on the planet Oa developed a screen to witness the creation of the universe, this caused a massive explosion which split reality and formed the multiverse. The Oans began a civil war, and several of them left for the Quard dimension, seeking the means to become all-powerful. Quard was in the antimatter dimension, and one day an excess energy on Quard's moon formed into a being known as the Anti-Monitor, who fed off of the evil energy of the antimatter universe and took over his universe. He wanted to then destroy all the positive matter universes in order to become as powerful as possible, causing the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he went to war with the various superheroes of the multiverse, which resulted in the multiverse being streamlined into one universe. Barely any of those sound like real words. He has destroyed and absorbed over 1,000 universes and is capable of being able to alter reality and increase the power levels of the villains who serve him. He is essentially immortal, being able to fight the strongest heroes from hundreds of universes at once without taking any apparent damage. It was only through the actions of the Spectre, who had been empowered by all of the various DC Universe's most powerful sorcerers, that the heroes were able to defeat him at the dawn of time. He was eventually killed by Superman 2, but was restored to life when the multiverse was recreated. Number 1. Necron. Necron's origins are shrouded in mystery, with rumors that he existed before life or was created by darkness itself to serve as its protector. Other stories say that he was imprisoned into the land of the unliving by the guardians of the universe near the beginning of time. For most of eternity he was unaware of life, but once he discovered its existence, he became obsessed with becoming its master. He fought against the Green Lantern several times with his army of the undead until he formed his own Lantern Corps by trapping the Anti-Monitor in his own central power battery. The Black Lanterns are comprised of dead superheroes as well as the entire population of the destroyed Coast City, who he has resurrected and forced to fight on his behalf. Even when his physical form is defeated, as he was never technically alive, he is simply sent back to the land of the unliving to begin plotting a new scheme to destroy life itself.
Starting off our list at number 10 is Apocalypse. If it wasn't for his goal of mutant domination and evolution, Apocalypse would vaporize the X-Men whenever he wanted to, and even if that wasn't how he did it, he has the capacity to wipe out the X-Men in a whole handful of ways. For starters, Apocalypse is what is called an external. These are mutants who are immortal, share a psychic connection, and who can revive themselves, so he can just never be permanently taken down, and he has been around for about 5,000 years. Apocalypse's original mutant ability was to be able to control his molecular structure, but over time, with the mentality of survival of the fittest, he has enhanced his abilities and even gained new ones through the use of celestial technology, celestial armor, and at least 2 different techno-organic viruses. He can do a lot with his molecular manipulation, including heal himself and turn his limbs into simple melee weapons, but also technologically complex weapons like plasma cannons. But I think the most impressive thing he can do is consciously and subconsciously grant himself a huge amount of powers at will. That makes him too much for the MCU already, and we haven't even talked about his celestial energy manipulation, his psionic abilities, or any of his countless horsemen of the apocalypse, all of whom were given power boosts by this unstoppable mutant. Coming in at number 9 is Thanos. Now before you come for me in the comments about how Thanos is literally already in the MCU, I want to point out the little fact that the version of Thanos from the MCU is like a schoolboy compared to the comic book version of Thanos. Thanos in the comics is an absolute monster. In the MCU, Thanos is fueled by an altruistic motive to help the universe. In the comics, he straight up enjoys taking people's lives. Thanos is essentially an omnicidal maniac. He's extremely prideful, violent, deceptive, malevolent, treacherous, and ruthless to the point that he doesn't care about sacrificing innumerable planets and civilizations, even his own race, in order to praise his love, Mistress Death, and gain her affection. Thanos also possesses an insatiable hunger for power, always seeking to obtain objects of incalculable might and influence, such as the cosmic cubes or the infinity gems. He does all that while speaking in a super sophisticated, calm, and collected demeanor, which they did get right in the MCU, I'll give them that. Not only that, but being a massive hulking Eternal with a deviant gene, Thanos is one of the most powerful of the Eternals of Titan, with an innate ability to synthesize cosmic energy, allowing for energy and matter manipulation. Thanos in the MCU is no pushover, sure, but comic book Thanos, he puts him to shame. Number 8, Zom. We have seen the character of Dormammu in the MCU. He was an insanely powerful mystical entity who Doctor Strange had to basically lose to 1,000,000 times and trick to defeat. Well, it took all of comic book Dormammu's power plus the help of the cosmic being Eternity just to restrain the extra-dimensional monster known as Zom, with the magical links of living bondage and the crown of blindness. And with these tools, these massively powerful beings only managed to trap Zom in an amphora, in a world beyond all worlds, in a time beyond all time. Well, when Umar, the sister of Dormammu, invaded Earth and Doctor Strange could not defeat her, he needed some way to put her down. The Ancient One told Doctor Strange about Zom, and Doctor Strange decided that he was going to unleash the monster to easily defeat Umar. Now, I don't know why the Ancient One thought this would be a good idea, because now, being free and not wanting to go back, Zom turned on Doctor Strange. Zom is so powerful that there was absolutely nothing that Doctor Strange could even do. Even if all the reality warping heroes and all the Avengers combined forces, they would not be able to defeat Zom. It took the power of the living tribunal, the representative of the one above all and the judge of the multiverse, who had not even been seen in Marvel Comics before this point, to just whisk him away. The tribunal then scolded Doctor Strange for summoning a being who could literally wipe out the multiverse. Zom has no other goal than to completely annihilate and destroy everything. ever. Now Strange has since channeled Zom in extremely dire situations, and that's the only time I could really imagine the MCU even mentioning his name. Number 7. Apocalypse. The name of the game for Apocalypse, or En Sabanur, is survival of the fittest. His powers manifested back in ancient Egypt with the powers of immortality and the ability to alter the molecular structure of his own body. Now, we unfortunately have to talk about time travel here. I'm sorry. While Apocalypse has history with Kang the Conqueror as Rama Tut, the more important time traveler that Apocalypse deals with is Nathan Summers, aka Cable. In the future world of Cable, Apocalypse had conquered the world, so in order to stop that, Nathan went back to ancient Egypt to defeat Apocalypse. Now during that fight, the techno-organic arm of Cable bonded to Apocalypse, who used it to interact with a celestial spaceship and integrate all of its technology into himself, amplifying and enhancing his existing powers, allowing him to do pretty much anything. He can teleport, interface with any technology, grant himself almost any power like strength, flight, energy beams, telepathy, telekinesis, and all kinds of stuff. Obviously, it all depends on the story he's in. He's so incredibly OP that his powers wax and wane based on the story. Like in the X-Men animated TV show, he grew to like 1,000 feet tall and just used energy beams to completely vaporize the X-Men. And that could totally happen in the comics too at any point if it served the story. Usually he just sends out his horsemen to test the mutants though. The thing that makes him even more unstoppable is his ability to move his spiritual essence into new host bodies when his physical body is either worn out from his massive power or destroyed in a fight.
Number 6. Hela. Hela is the daughter of Loki, who was appointed by Odin to be the goddess of death. He would come to regret this choice, as Hela soon began several attempts to steal his and his son Thor's souls and to conquer Asgard for herself. In one of her most disturbing plots, she cursed Thor with immortal life, but a frail and decrepit body. She eventually reversed this and moved to Las Vegas, where she began to feed upon the souls of the unlucky. As the goddess of death, she can't really die, and is able to heal any injury with great speed, even being able to come back from disintegration. She has the power to kill immortal beings with a simple touch, making her a force to be reckoned with for Thor, let alone the normal human heroes he works with.
Number 5. The Fury. Many people may actually not know of the Fury, and there's a rather simple reason for that. The Fury came about in Marvel Superheroes UK, which is Marvel's attempt to branch out to British audiences and revamp Captain Britain. But it was also a way for Marvel to open up and explain the concept of the multiverse, and this all happened in the Crooked World story. This story deals with one of the most powerful reality warping mutants ever, named Mad Jim Jaspers on Earth 238. But he's not even the focus of this point. Mad Jim Jaspers became the leading political leader in England, rallying the people against superheroes, and he created what was essentially a robot called the Fury, for the sole purpose of taking down superheroes, and my lord, the Fury is good at it. In the matter of 2 years, the Fury decimated every single superpowered being on Earth 238 except for Jim Jaspers. The Fury is similar to the Sentinels we see in the X-Men Days of Future Past movie, because this robot can analyze superhuman powers or any threat and modify its own defenses and capabilities to combat it. But it can also fire extremely potent energy blasts and even restore itself after being completely destroyed. The Fury ends up completely obliterating Captain Britain, causing him to be revived. And that was all a test for Captain Britain to face the much more powerful Mad Jim Jaspers from Earth 616. Now, the universe of Earth 238 gets destroyed, but the Fury adapts to even that and develops the ability to travel across dimensional barriers to continue its mission. The only thing going against this being is that he doesn't have a ton of appearances, so it's kind of hard to judge him against other beings.
Number 4. Thanos. Thanos was born on one of Saturn's moons, Titan, and had the deviant gene, which gave him thick purple skin as well as superior strength and heightened powers. He fell in love with a woman who turned out to be Death, and dedicated his life to impressing her by destroying as many living things as possible. Thanos has conquered countless worlds in his quest to impress Death, and is responsible for unleashing unspeakable horrors upon them. For instance, when he conquers a world, it is not uncommon for him to demand a tribute of the heads of everyone from the ages of 16 to 22. This insane demand is part of his plan to fulfill a request from Death to rid the universe of any of his offspring, and rather than put in the time to find out where learned who his children are, he chooses to save time by implementing this method. As he is pretty much unstoppable for anyone but the most powerful superheroes, most planets are forced to go along with his insane demands. In his most iconic moment, he came up with a plan to acquire the Infinity Gems and wipe out half of all life in the universe in order to impress his love. Unlike many other evildoers who make these elaborate plans and then fail, Thanos actually pulled this off, getting all the gems and using the Infinity Gauntlet to enact his deadly romantic gesture.
Getting close to the end in number 3, Squirrel Girl. Okay, I mean, there's a whole series called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, so I think that you kind of deserve to be on the list. The solo series debuted in January of 2015 and ran for 8 issues and was relaunched in October of 2015 as part of Marvel's all-new, all-different Marvel branding, and was published through to November of 2019 with 50 issues for a total of 58. Both series were written by Ryan North, but in issue number 4 of volume 1, Squirrel Girl literally stops Galactus from coming after Earth by being friends with him. I mean, come on, you're literally unable to sit there and tell me that this doesn't make her deserving of this list. Bro, she didn't even have to fight him, for God's sakes. That's actually insane, dude. She just talked the Devourer of Worlds into not going after Earth. Plus, I know that you all love Squirrel Girl, okay? I may not have been here for a while, okay, but I know that much. I also know that saying anything against the Hulk will get me mean DMs for 3 years, but hey, at least you love Squirrel Girl. And honestly, after reading this issue, I have to say I agree. It's pretty freaking nuts. Yes, I made the pun, alright? You were all waiting for it, I hope.
Number 2, Punisher. The Punisher truly is a man who never backs down. I mean, we even see this bizarrely enough reflected in his interaction in the comics with Archie Andrews, who was also on this list. Punisher is willing to venture kind of into a totally different world in order to apprehend a criminal. And he succeeds, after of course mistaking Archie for the criminal, but that of course is easy to do when you consider how similar he looks to the man that Punisher was after. Punisher is so committed to catching the evildoer, he resorts to food fight tactics. And for Frank Castle, who often prefers to fight with guns, you better bet that's commitment. That's unstoppable when you're willing to throw a cake at someone.
And finally, in at number 1, Scarlet Witch. Considering how the entirety of House of M is meant to be about how she changed reality, I think it's fairly safe to say that she's a powerful hero, even if she isn't a hero all the time. Like in Multiverse of Madness, for example, when she somehow was able to send demons and monsters across different dimensions to attack America Chavez, but couldn't just go to those dimensions herself. Even if she was a villain in this scenario, she was still able to take on the Illuminati from their universe and beat them all fairly easily, proving that not only is she an extremely powerful mutant, whether she's on either side, but also that falling boulders can kill a Captain Marvel, and are also therefore the most dangerous obstacle or weapon in the Marvel Universe. The only limit to Wanda's abilities in any incarnation really is her brain, which is like my one gripe with Multiverse of Madness, since her whole point of taking America's powers for herself was in case her kids got sick and died again. But like, you've turned a whole city into your own personal TV show and brought your dead Infinity Stone powered boyfriend back for it. So I think you can handle a little chicken pox if your sons get caught or get whatever you think they're gonna get in whatever universe, but that's also a way for them to explain why she didn't do it, since the movie was all about setting up the premise of incursions. But either way, come on, Scarlet Witch, yeah, it's the thumbnail, I think. I don't know, I actually don't know.
Number 10, MODOK. This version of MODOK is not to be confused with the original form of the original Earth 616 MODOK, whose acronymic name ended originally in a C also. Where the Earth 616 MODOK C typically stands for computation or computing, this version of MODOK C stood for conquering. This MODOK hails from Earth 20051, first appearing in the 2000 series Marvel Adventures The Avengers. Here, MODOK successfully converts the Avengers into his own loyal minions by turning them into MODOKs. Fortunately for the Avengers, but not so fortunate for MODOK I guess, they would realize that this transformation was only temporary and would manage to break free from his control. Here, MODOK originally stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Conquest. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and like me, you also love all the supervillains, be sure to check out our supervillain playlist for even more villainy. Number 9. Modam. What happens when you combine MODOK with Doc Ock? Modam! Modam is actually a female version of MODOK. She was unique in the sense that she had long metallic Dr. Octopus-esque arms in addition to what MODOK had. She was also equipped with a doomsday chair, and of course she had lipstick because she's a lady MODOK, so you know, we gotta know. Gotta have that lipstick. Initially, Modam was Alinka Barankova before she was transformed, although for a time she was actually suspected to have originally been Hank Pym's first wife, Maria Travoya, but we learned the truth. She didn't last too long in the comics, about 10 years, first appearing in West Coast Avengers issue number 36, where we thought of course that she was Maria, and dying in Captain America issue number 3 in the late 90s series of that comic. Number 8. Ultimate MODOK. This version of MODOK definitely looks a lot more terrifying than most. This version of George Tarleton was the head of AIM in terms of their research division anyways, on their space station. He ended up transforming from man to machine to just straight up monstrosity, and the transformation happened pretty quickly there. During a fight against Galactus, Vision, also of Earth 1610, turned on him. In this reality, Vision is a female android who ended up ripping off Tarleton's head after he chose to sacrifice another AI that she had grown attached to during combat. From here, Tarleton would become more the kind of MODOK we'd know him for, with his head moving around on spindly, spider-like limbs and managing to survive despite being separated from his body. At one point, MODOK returns with his own Galactus cult and even manages to take hold of and control part of the Galactus swarm.
Number 7. Mephisto. Within the Marvel Universe, Mephisto is, for all intents and purposes, the devil. He isn't actually. Technically, he is a demonic hell lord who rules over his own hell-like dimension and enjoys stealing people's souls by tricking them, and he does that by pretending he is the actual devil, playing on people's fears, so basically he's the devil. While Mephisto is within his dimension, which he calls hell, he is immortal, omniscient, and impossible to destroy. It's only when he ventures into other realms that he can be defeated, but doing so just kind of returns him back to his own dimension. He has been a major player in the Marvel Universe since his creation and has been either a key or supporting player for many major events. He was the Snake in the old Adam and Eve story. He was directly responsible for the creation of Ghost Rider. He's infamously erased the history of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's marriage in order to save Aunt May's life. I mean, he even popped up a hotel out of the ground in Las Vegas that manipulated the citizens and let him take their souls. He has been defeated and outmaneuvered multiple times, but he has never permanently been stopped. Number 6. The Phoenix Force. Now, it's important to say the Phoenix Force is not a villain, technically. It is a cosmic entity representing all life in the Omniverse. The Phoenix Force will exist as long as there is, was, or will be life. If the Phoenix Force were to be destroyed, if that were even possible, all life would follow after it, as well as the ability for life to have begun in the first place. The Phoenix Force is just a force of nature, but it has been used as a darker force of power in the past. For example, when it inhabited Jean Grey during the Dark Phoenix saga. It was at this time the entity was a villain, using Jean's insane levels of psychic power, which it then amplified to godlike levels. With this entity inhabiting her body, Jean and the Phoenix destroyed an entire solar system and attacked her fellow X-Men. Jean had to actually bring her own end just to stop what was happening, and when the Phoenix regained its memories of all the evil it had done, it brought Jean back to life to help make things a little better. And that's not the only time. There was the whole X-Men versus Avengers thing, and there was that time that Thane, Thanos' son, had the Phoenix Force. Almost every time the power of the Phoenix Force comes up, it usually corrupts its bearer and makes like a big stink. Like a huge stink. Big old fart. Number 5. Dormammu. Most fans of Doctor Strange know Dormammu. This being composed of pure magic energy rules the dark dimension and spends most of his time taking over other realities as he finds them. He is essentially immortal and capable of wielding godly power over magic, the dead, souls, and pretty much anything, really. When he is in our reality, he can be thwarted and returned to his own, usually by the Sorcerer Supreme, but within the dark dimension, he reigns supreme and cannot be taken down, like, at all. Using his vast magical abilities and the influence of his power, he he is constantly trying to invade our reality, and even when he is banished back or he is stopped, he always comes back eventually, and he has been doing this for millennia. Number 4. The Beyonder. The Beyonder is a singular entity with no duplicate versions of himself in other universes, similar to the Phoenix Force. And also a lot like the Phoenix Force, Beyonder is basically like a baby in that he is a younger member of a race called the Beyonders that are a near omnipotent alien race from a dimension outside of the multiverse. He is himself basically a whole universe. It's really hard to explain, but as he observes Earth and the Marvel Universe and the various races, he gets a little curious, and the Beyonder decides to study and analyze life and humanity, good and evil and conflict, and to that purpose he pits Earth's mightiest heroes and villains against each other in the Secret Wars. Now, he did this by destroying an entire system of planets and creating Battleworld from the remains and from parts of Earth, so that's one level of power right there. Beyonder's powers surpass that of Eternity and the Living Tribunal, but that has been retconned recently. And he is capable of manipulating reality to his will, being able to pretty much do whatever he wants and then grant himself any power he wants. It was actually a huge treat though last year in the Defenders Beyond story when we learned that the Beyonder and his race were actually still in existence, and he was now an adult existing with the rest of the adult Beyonders outside of the multiverse and being all levels of wildly insanely powerful. There's a lot I skimmed over here to make it less confusing, but you should just go read all the Secret Wars if you want to see how crazy these beings actually are. Number 3. Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, is an incredibly powerful extra-dimensional being who was worshipped as a god and as a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos, which is where he comes from. Now, as the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. Simple as that. To do this though, from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other godlike deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, which kinda gives us 2 different versions of Unstoppable all wrapped up into one package. You're welcome. Merry Christmas. That's for you. As the Juggernaut is essentially a physically unstoppable force of kinetic energy, unless you're the Hulk, I guess, then you can stop him. I don't know why. Anyways, Sidorak is such a powerful and unstoppable godlike entity that you will even hear magic users invoking his name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Number 2. The Chaos King. While he is relatively obscure, he is nothing to scoff at. Amatsu Mikobashi, first appearing in Thor Blood Oath number 6 in 2006, was mistaken as the Japanese god of chaos and evil, but in actuality, he was an aspect of the cosmic being Oblivion. Now, Mikobashi ruled and thrived over the earth when it was nothing more than a formless void of primordial darkness. And as such, his goal now is to put an end to creation and bring about a new age of chaos and void and darkness. He is a primordial being who was imprisoned in Yomi, which is the Shinto underworld, which is where he remained for centuries, accruing an army of Oni, which is Shinma demons, and other monsters. Now, during the events of Ares, god of war, Chaos King attacks Olympus after he defeated and controlled the Japanese pantheon of gods, and after the fall of Asgard during Ragnarok. This is what kind of kickstarts his mission in Chaos War, where he slays the Egyptian gods, Celtic gods, Shi'ar gods, gods of Zen law. He takes out Nightmare in the dream dimension, destroys Mephisto, and casts Mistress Death out of hell, making her literally run away. And he releases the souls of the damned. He did all that. He has the power to defeat eternity and is practically unfazed by attacks from the likes of Zeus. God Hercules, Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Thor together could not defeat Chaos King. To win, Hercules had to literally punch him into a portal to an endless void of nothingness, and this was after he destroyed 98.76% of the entire universe. That's a lot. Number 1. Chthon. Chthon is one of the most powerful demons to ever exist. Even though he predates anything like this, of all the devil-like demons out there, including Mephisto, Chthon is the closest thing to the actual devil. He and his Ngari actually ruled the earth before the angel Lucifer attacked them, and that was before Lucifer ever rebelled against heaven and became the actual actual devil. Chthon himself is responsible for all the witches, werewolves, vampires, and other dark creatures, as well as being the master of the most powerful form of magic, chaos magic, which is the same stuff used by the Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch has altered all of reality with just a fraction of that magic, so yeah, it's a lot. His opposite, Oshter, is one of the three beings that make up the Vishanti, and they stand in direct opposition to Chthon specifically, creating the Book of Vishanti in response to Chthon's Darkhold. Other demons and dark sorcerers, including Dormammu and Mephisto, call on Chthon's name to cast some of their strongest spells, and the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, was almost corrupted and permanently taken out by Chthon's mere presence alone. He is extremely hard to bring down, and even if you manage to do so, it's only a matter of time until he comes back.
Number 10. Circe. Circe was a woman in ancient Greece whose beauty was apparently unparalleled. She married a wealthy prince, but he was a brutish, cruel drunk who she viewed as an animal, so she killed him before eventually coming into contact with the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate, who granted her 1/5 of her soul, which made her a master of magic capable of imposing her will and power on others. After Circe sold her soul, she became obsessed with regaining it from the dimension of hell where it had been sent. She is willing to do anything and sacrifice anyone to try and regain what she has lost. She is known for turning men into animals that serve as her minions, and has magic powers which allow her to open portals and teleport or give life to inanimate objects. She has geokinesis, the ability to possess people, as well as the ability to freeze time to pull herself and others out of a moment. She is a constant thorn in Wonder Woman's side and a constant source of chaos in the DC universe. Number 9. Black Adam. Teth Adam was a member of the Kandaki tribe in ancient Egypt, whose people were forced into servitude by a cruel pharaoh of the time. Most of his family was killed, but Teth Adam was able to escape with his nephew Amun when the wizard Shazam brought them to the Rock of Eternity to make Amun his chosen champion. Amun learned that he could share his powers with Adam, and the two returned to free their people. Amun wanted to find a peaceful solution, but Adam felt that peace was not an option and wanted revenge, so he killed his nephew in order to gain his power for his own. In the present day of the DC universe, he is the ruler of Kandak, and sometimes a member of super teams like the Justice Society. He flip-flops between being an anti-hero and a straight-up villain, but the fact that he once started World War III and murdered millions of innocent civilians makes me more than comfortable putting him on a villain's list. His enchantment from the wizard Shazam has granted him the strength of Shu, the speed of Horus, the strength of Amun, the wisdom of Zahudi, the power of Aten, and the courage of Mehen. This gives him super strength, speed, flight, and lightning casting abilities, which makes him capable of taking out most of the heroes of the DC universe with ease. The only people who seem to be able to consistently stop him are Shazam, who has pretty much the same powers, and of course, Superman. Number 8. The Reverse Flash. There is some variation on the origins of the Reverse Flash depending on the continuity you are looking at, but usually he is a man from the 25th century called Eobard Thawne, who develops a fascination with the Flash. He works for years on studying the Speed Force until he eventually manages to replicate the accident that gave Barry Allen his superpowers and tries to become a hero himself. Because his time period doesn't have much need for heroes, he causes incidents that he can then solve himself. He eventually became friends with the Flash, but once Flash became aware of his true nature, he turned Thawne away and he became the Reverse Flash. Reverse Flash wants to gain his friend's respect and become an integral part of his history, so he traveled through time to mess with Barry's life, doing rather minor things like tripping him on the stairs when he was a kid and going to such extremes as killing his mother in front of him as a child. Reverse Flash's ability to manipulate the timeline makes him almost unstoppable, as if someone gets in his way, he simply travels through time and erases them from existence, as he did to his own brother, Roburn. Due to him being so weaved throughout history, Barry can't even stop him without risking creating an alternate timeline, as when he prevented Reverse Flash from killing Nora Allen and accidentally created the dystopian Flashpoint timeline. Even when Barry does manage to kill Thawne, because he is so connected to the negative Speed Force, he is always brought back before long.
Number 7. Darth Malgus. Darth Malgus was originally known by his given name Veridon. As Veridin, he was raised in a part of space that was loyal to the Empire, and when his Force sensitivity first manifested, when he killed a servant, he was sent to the Sith Academy for further training, which honestly makes a lot of sense. If the Force kind of seems to be strong with you and then you kill someone, definitely time for the Sith Academy. He first appeared in the Deceived trailer for the video game Star Wars: The Old Republic. Following his training, he became a Sith warrior, serving in the Imperial Army. As an apprentice to Darth Vindican, he took the name of Darth Malgus for himself. After suffering a dramatic defeat and injury on Alderaan, he was forced to permanently wear a respirator. Initially, his attempt to invade Alderaan had actually been successful, with him actually launching a pretty efficient surprise attack, but afterwards the Republic managed to push back the Sith in response with their own successful counterattack, and that's where he got pretty badly injured. Number 6. Emperor Darth Revan. Darth Revan is an interesting one. Not many knew of the character's relevance as a Sith Lord, due to the Sith history only being known, of course, to Sith cultists throughout the galaxy. As such, Revan's name was mainly unknown, lost to the sands of time. Revan, however, would have a Stormtrooper Legion named after them because, fun fact, Stormtrooper Legions are apparently typically named after Sith Lords, ancient Sith Lords. In truth, Revan was a former Jedi Knight who left the Order and ended up becoming the Dark Lord of the Sith. They formed a Sith Empire, but eventually became an amnesiac who was retrained and indoctrinated into the Jedi Order, later actually used to fight against the very Sith Empire they had once built. Revan is actually the character that you play as in the game Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and can be customized to look however you prefer them to look, with you also choosing their gender. In canon, however, Revan was established as male, with the light side ending of the game being established in lore as the canon ending, so just so you know that. Number 5. Darth Talon. While I feel like female Sith Lords are weirdly rare, Talon is a great one who really makes up for the lack of quantity of Sith ladies with just straight up quality. Talon herself is visually striking, covered head to toe in Sith tattoos. Each of these tattoos were earned through ritual combat. She was the apprentice initially of Sith Lord Darth Ryan, but would betray him at the command of Dark Lord of the Sith Emperor Darth Krayt, separating his head from his body with her lightsaber, as, a lot of Sith Lords love to do that. Talon would become one of 2 of Krayt's most loyal followers and apprentices, and when he was eventually defeated, she actually ended up going into hiding, continuing to operate in the shadows, striving to serve the needs and accomplish the goals of the One Sith, which is sometimes also known as the New Sith Order. Darth Talon was created by John Ostrander and Jan Duursema, and was first introduced in the Dark Horse comic series Star Wars Legacy. Number 4. Ajunta Pall. Ajunta Pall was the first Dark Lord of the Sith, the very first one. Although being the first ruler of the First Order of Siths, he did not have a Sith name that he was known by, at least not one that I was able to find, instead being simply known as just Ajunta Pall or Master Paul to his followers. As indicated by his title, Paul was once a Jedi and Jedi Master, a member of the Jedi Order. He began to study alchemy during his time as a Jedi and would discover how to create and shape life. Despite this impressive discovery, the Jedi Order did not celebrate Paul, but instead feared him and his newfound power, deeming it as part of the dark side of the Force and condemning him. For this, he was kicked out of the Jedi Order, who then attempted to basically erase the knowledge of his discoveries in order to prevent anyone else from tampering with this newfound power. Frustrated at having been judged and rejected, Master Paul and his followers declared war on the Order, beginning the period known in history as the 100-Year Darkness. Paul comes from the expanded universe and I believe first appeared in the Dark Horse Star Wars comics. Number 3. Darth Bane. Darth Bane, while perhaps not as well known in terms of Sith and Sith Lords, is actually quite an important Sith in terms of their history. He is the creator of the Rule of Two. The Rule of Two maintains that at all times there can only be 2 Sith, a Master and their apprentice. Bane actually created the Rule of Two to protect the Sith, after being the lone survivor of the Jedi-Sith War. Bane believed that the Sith's competitive nature and their focus on destroying one another had ultimately weakened them to the point that, he was the last one. So he created the Rule of Two to help them better, somewhat, work together, thereby preserving them and their beliefs. The Jedi-Sith War happened about 1,000 years prior to the events of the Clone Wars and resulted in almost all of the Sith being wiped out by the Jedi Order, save for Bane. The Rule of Two might seem like a small thing considering that it doesn't seem to, greatly increase the Sith's numbers, only going from 1 Sith at the top to like 2 of them, but it actually was successful in prolonging their survival thousands of years into the future. After the death of Darth Bane, who was killed supposedly by his own apprentice, the Jedi believed they had succeeded in wiping out all of the Sith, and a 1,000-year era of peace was ushered in. However, his apprentice survived, becoming the new master. With the Jedi left unsuspecting, this actually allowed the Sith to plot in the shadows, spreading their influence throughout the galaxy and bolstering their power in secret. Darth Bane first appeared in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Number 2. Darth Zana. Darth Zana is relatively unknown even within the world of Star Wars itself, but still serves a super important role in the continuation and evolution of the Sith. Zana was the apprentice of Darth Bane. She was trained to carry on the rules and teachings of Bane, including the self-preserving Rule of Two. We don't know much about her, or even really how she killed her master, but it's believed that she fought and killed Bane in a duel. Zana has only been mentioned a few select times in Star Wars media, and it's not only a mysterious figure to Star Wars fans, but also to characters within the world, as accurate historical records were, not really kept in regards to her life and her story. She was actually first mentioned in the novel Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace by Terry Brooks, based off the film, of course, of the same name. Here, Darth Zana was first wrongfully referred to using the pronoun him, and this would actually later be corrected in other media, where instead it would be established that Zana used the pronouns of she, her. Now we know Zana probably lady. Be cool to actually hear more about Darth Zana. I would be interested. Number 1. Emperor Darth Vitiate. Darth Vitiate is quite the Sith. While to me Darth Vitiate is not as well known, if you go hard when it comes to Star Wars, there is a chance that this is a Sith Lord you might recognize thanks to his extensive history and his impressive feats. Truly, this is a Sith Lord that earns the unstoppable part of this title. Darth Vitiate is the son of the Sith Lord Drameth. Even growing up, he showed a great penchant for power and influence, conquering his own village and people by the age of 10 on planet Madrius. Hearing of this, Lord Drameth came to see for himself what chaos his son had wrought and was killed by his son. Unafraid and filled with brazen confidence, Tenebrae, as he was known at the time, would end up making his way to Dark Lord of the Sith, Marka Ragnos, where he would prove himself and be rewarded with the title of Sith Lord, becoming known as Lord Vitiate. He would also go on not just to become a Sith Lord, but also take for himself the title of Emperor. Vitiate would set out with his forces to once more find and reclaim the Sith homeworld of Dromund Kaas, ushering in the new dawn for his Sith Empire. Seeking complete immortality, Vitiate also sought to gain more power and in essence, basically become a god, becoming probably one of the most ambitious Sith Lords we have ever known in Sith history. Vitiate and his empire were first alluded to in the video game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Number 2, the Sith Lord.
Number 10. Dr. Doom. Some of you are already typing your comments claiming that Victor Von Doom is not a villain and is instead an anti-hero. I would disagree, saying that he's at best an anti-villain, but honestly if I didn't include him I'd be getting just as many comments complaining about his exclusion, so let's put him at the bottom and agree that Dr. Doom started out as a villain and has become more nuanced and difficult to peg down in the years since. Victor Von Doom was the child of Romani people living in Latveria. His mother was a sorceress, and after her and his father's passing, Victor began to study her books, teaching himself the dark arts. He also developed a keen scientific mind, which made him a legendary scientist and inventor at a very young age, and led to him being tracked down by the US military and offered further education in the States. It was here that he met Reed Richards, with whom he developed a lifelong rivalry. While still in school, he developed his infamous Doom bots and also built a functional time machine. He was disfigured in an accident that resulted in his expulsion, and he went on to become the leader of some monks who helped him build his iconic armor. He became the main antagonist of the Fantastic Four and the dictator of the country of Latveria, causing lots of problems for the heroes of the Marvel Universe. His status as one of the most brilliant minds on Earth, as well as him being one of the Earth's most powerful sorcerers, combined with his diplomatic immunity, makes him a force to be reckoned with for both the heroes and the villains of the Marvel Universe.
And at number 9 is Sabretooth. Sabretooth is like the darker, bigger, and stronger brother of Wolverine. He isn't actually Wolverine's brother, but the fights between Wolverine and Sabretooth were the absolute most bloody, knockdown, drag-out, legendary fights that go to such drastic extremes, and that's because neither of these guys can really be stopped, since they both possess an absolutely massive, powerful healing factor. They share a lot of qualities, honestly. Sabretooth has adamantium-laced bones and claws, superhuman senses, superhuman attributes, and even psionic resistance instances as well. The thing about Sabretooth is that he is just pure animalistic fury, a mindless killing machine, but one who has the training to make him just that much more of a force to be reckoned with. Even when he is stopped, he's almost never fully destroyed because of that damn healing factor that makes him next to impossible to bring down. Sure, he doesn't warp reality or cross-dimensional barriers, but even when he was thrown into the pit on Krakoa, where he was trapped alive but unable to move, he still proved a problem as he figured out how to escape.
Magneto. When Mac Eisenhart was a young man in Germany, he was subjected to many atrocities at the hands of the Third Reich, who sent him to Auschwitz for no reason other than being Jewish. He eventually escaped and became known as Erich Lenscher. He discovered that he had the ability to control the powers of magnetism, and after the war, used them to track down former German soldiers. He developed the belief that mutants and humanity could not coexist and became Magneto, a mutant dedicated to mutant superiority and the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He fought the X-Men several times over the years, but they eventually came to an uneasy truce, working together to form a refuge for their kind on the island of Krakoa, which is good for everyone as Magneto is a very difficult villain to stop and has stood up to the entire Avengers team, once reversed the Earth's magnetic poles, and also created a global EMP which took out the world's technology, showing that he could plunge us back to the Dark Ages whenever he wants. Number 7. Venom. Ultimate Venom is not an alien symbiote, but a genetically engineered suit developed by Eddie Brock and Peter Parker's dads. When Peter used the symbiote to get his black suit, Eddie became jealous and fused with a sample of the symbiote that was in storage. This caused him to become Venom. While in Venom form, he has an insatiable hunger and has to consume people at a regular rate in order to not be consumed from within the suit. He has all of the classic Venom's powers, like the strength, the healing, the ability to override Peter's spider sense, but unlike the classic Venom, he doesn't have the same level of weakness to sonics and fire. Electricity is his weakness, but his savagery makes him even more dangerous than the original Venom. He became even more powerful when he absorbed the Carnage symbiote, becoming even bigger and monstrous than before. Number 6. Namor. Namor was introduced in the 610 universe in Ultimate Fantastic Four number 24, when the Four were helping Mary Storm with her discovery of Atlantis, and they found a sarcophagus which contained Namor. The translation of the Atlantean language said that Namor was king of Atlantis before it was destroyed. However, they soon discovered that this Namor was much less noble than his 616 counterpart. A revised translation revealed that he had not been entombed, he had been imprisoned, and that he was not a king, but the most dangerous supercriminal in all of Atlantean history. He tried to seduce Sue Storm, but was rejected. He didn't take this well and went on a rampage. He went toe-to-toe with the Thing, withstood the full force of the Human Torch's power, stretched Mr. Fantastic almost to the breaking point, and smashed through Sue's force fields. He defeated the team and held the city hostage with a tsunami, threatening to destroy the city unless Sue gave him a kiss. She complied and Namor departed. In subsequent appearances, he has been a bit more chill and did lose some fights, but that debut says it all. Number 5. Magneto. Ultimate Magneto has all the powers that the original does, but none of his mercy. He doesn't just view mutants as superior to humans, he views humans as insects. In one of his most amazing moments, he stormed Washington with sentinels that he had reprogrammed and dragged the president naked onto the White House lawn to kill him. The only reason that he was stopped by the X-Men was because his own son, Quicksilver, saw that things had gone too far and betrayed his father, removing his helmet with his super speed. In his biggest plot, he actually proved how much of a nearly unstoppable force he could really be. In Ultimatum, Magneto had been driven mad at the loss of his children, and he decided that rather than destroying humanity in order to make the world safe from mutants, he's just gonna kill everyone. He uses a doomsday device and his powers to shift the world off of its axis, causing disasters all over the globe. Much of Europe, including all of Latveria, is frozen under a layer of ice, and New York is hit by a massive tidal wave. Millions of people all over the world die in the attack. He plans on using the plan again to decimate the rest of the world, but all of the heroes left in the world team up to stop him, and Cyclops ends up killing him. But the fact that he got as far into his plan as he did, and that it took literally every hero in the world working together to stop him, is pretty impressive. Number 4. Apocalypse. So the 1610 version of Apocalypse is one of the most changed versions of a classic villain. This universe's Mr. Sinister was a scientist who had a psychotic break and believed himself to be working at the behest of Apocalypse. He made Mr. Sinister track down and kill several mutants, believing that it would cause his master to manifest on Earth. When he had completed his task, Sinister floated into the air and was transformed into Apocalypse. The X-Men attacked him but didn't count on his ability to take their mutant powers away. He tore off Wolverine's arm and battled both the X-Men and the Morlocks, and used his powers to make the two groups fight each other against their will. He then fought a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and the Fantastic Four, who couldn't hurt him in the slightest. Professor X then attacked with his mental powers, but Apocalypse was somehow able to resist and overpower the Professor. It would have been curtains for Charles, but Jean Grey unleashed the Phoenix Force and destroyed the villain. So, he was able to take on the combined forces of the Morlocks, S.H.I.E.L.D., the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, and the only force powerful enough to cause him any trouble at all was the Phoenix Force, which, by the way, is much less villainous in the Ultimate Universe.
Number 3. Mad Jim Jaspers. When Captain Britain is sent to Earth 238 in Marvel Superheroes UK number 377 in August of 1981, we are introduced to a guy named Mad Jim Jaspers, who is the Prime Minister of England in this reality. Jim has created a cyborg called the Fury that can adapt to anything like a Sentinel can to destroy all the superpowered beings on this Earth. But that's not Jim's power. We are being delivered this information from the inside of a teapot helicopter that is immensely bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside, with the room growing and characters appearing that are already passed away or that resemble Alice in the Wonderland characters. That's because Mad Jim Jaspers is a mutant with an insane level of reality warping powers. The thing is, this character is not fully in control of his abilities. Now eventually we are introduced to an Earth 616 reality Mad Jim Jaspers, who is way more powerful than his 238 counterpart. When Captain Britain pays him a visit, Jim uses his powers to make Captain Britain believe that he was dreaming and that he has woken up out of a coma. He then gets frustrated and wipes this entire reality clean to start everything fresh. Now I don't know what the likelihood of getting Captain Britain into the MCU is, with the multiverse becoming more prominent, it's more likely, but this insanely powerful reality warper is not someone who I expect will ever make an appearance anytime soon. Number 2. The Chaos King. Amatsu Mikubashi first appeared in Thor Blood Oath number 6 in 2006, and he is the Japanese god of chaos, evil, and an aspect of the cosmic being Oblivion. Mikubashi ruled and thrived over the earth when it was nothing more than a formless void of primordial darkness, and as such, his goal now is to bring about a new age of chaos and void and darkness. He is a primordial being who was imprisoned in Yomi, the Shinto underworld, where he remained for centuries, accruing an army of Oni, Shinma demons, and other monsters. Now during the events of Ares God of War, Chaos King attacks Olympus after he had defeated and controlled the Japanese pantheon, meaning he had already done that and then he goes on to attack Olympus. And that was all after the fall of Asgard during Ragnarok. This is what kickstarts his mission in Chaos War, where he slays the Egyptian gods, the Celtic gods, Shi'ar gods, and the gods of Zen law. He takes out Nightmare in the Dream Dimension, destroys Mephisto, and casts Mistress Death out of hell, making her literally run away, and releases the souls of the damned. He has the power to defeat Eternity and is practically unfazed by attacks from the likes of Zeus. God Hercules, Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Thor together could not defeat Chaos King. To win, this insanely powerful god of gods Hercules had to punch the Chaos King into a portal to an endless void of nothingness, and this was after he had already destroyed 98.76% of the universe. They wouldn't let Gore the God Butcher be as big of a threat to the gods in the MCU as he is in the comics. The Chaos King wipes out 90% of the universe. I just don't see it happening in the MCU at this time. It's just not gonna happen. And finally, in at number 1, the One Below All. In Marvel Comics, there is a character called the One Above All, who hasn't really been seen all too often, but is essentially the equivalent to God, or the Creator. Now we have gods like Odin and Zeus and Thor in Marvel Comics and the MCU, but this is kinda different. The One Above All is like the god of everything, the supreme ruler of creation and compassion. It's even been represented as the writers of Marvel Comics at one point, just to give you an idea. So the One Below All, as you can imagine, is the antithesis to this, the personification of destruction and hate. Another way of looking at it is that the One Below All is the One Above All's Hulk form, although that kind of makes things a little bit more complex. The one below all is trapped in the below place and manifests in realities through gamma and gamma mutates. Basically, this means that the Hulk and other gamma mutated beings have fractions of the one below all's power and can be taken over by the one below all for him to try and escape and destroy everything. In an alternate future, it actually does this, taking over Bruce Banner's body and using his power to devour the cosmic entity Eternity and eradicate all life in not only this version of the cosmos, but even going into the next iteration of the universe, ensuring that nothing in that universe will continue to be. Luckily, this is prevented in the Immortal Hulk story, but I'm telling you, go read that story. The one above all and the one below all seem like beings that are just too conceptual that I don't know if they'd be making it into Marvel's cinematic universe. But the other part of this is that the Immortal Hulk storyline that features the one below all is way too graphic for it to be adapted to the MCU and Disney's brand.
Number 10, Beast. Beast is probably one of the most unstoppable characters at Marvel Comics right now. And while technically still a hero, so relevant to this list in terms of his classification between being a goodie and a baddie in general, he still has been up to some pretty questionable things in order to protect Krakoa, including basically turning Wolverine into a mindless slave. On the more optimistic side of Hank's history though, we also see an example of how unstoppable he can be in terms of his ability to seek out knowledge and never give up. After House of M, Beast for a good while was focused on finding a way to restore mutant kind and bring back the mutants they had lost in the aftermath, thanks to Wanda's reality warping magic. Hank tried everything from science to mysticism, but in the end was sadly unsuccessful. However, he still searched far and wide for a very long time, which I think should get him some unstoppable points. I think he also even created an organization just to figure that problem out, so yeah. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by giving this video a thumbs up.
And at 9, Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is the son of Reed and Sue Richards from the Fantastic Four, obviously. I don't feel like I needed to say it, but I still needed to say it. And even while currently or in the actual real present year of the comics, he's a toddler, he's still an absolute powerhouse, and I'm gonna count him, okay? Especially since the freaking Celestials have deemed this kid beyond Omega level on the scale of mutant-based powers. Cause when a future version of yourself comes to your present and then manages to bend Galactus to their will, making Galactus Franklin's herald, I don't think there's much else that they can really do aside from just accept it. Hey, that's like 100%ing life. There's nothing you can do after that, which I think speaks for itself. This kid is able to tear the universe apart with a single thought in essence, probably making him the scariest damn toddler on the face of the earth and the galaxy, aside from eventually when I have mine, because that will be the spawn of Satan. And that's also coming from someone who already thinks that toddlers are scary. Alright, you should have seen that one who was trying to stab me with safety scissors. That was a time. Gotta love Tuesdays. Also, according to the history of the Marvel Universe, the book, Franklin Richards is supposed to survive until the end of his universe and then pass on to the next one, like Galactus did, which is insane. Dude was born from a girl who can go invisible and a guy who can stretch. Jeez.
Number 8, Moon Girl. Friends, I just read the Moon Girl team up with the X-Men, which continues her journey on the hunt for Devil Dinosaur, who has been dino-napped, and it was way too cute, and I have to include her, so sorry but not sorry. Also, Moon Girl does not get enough love, and Luna Lafayette, she's pretty unstoppable, let's be honest. Not only does she succeed in rescuing Devil Dinosaur in her team-up series, and as such will be returning with her own series with her Dino pal in tow, which I recently picked up the first issue of, although I haven't read it yet, but she also has solved problems that have stumped many genius-level individuals in the Marvel Universe. Moon Girl was smart enough to find a way to almost single-handedly destroy the Terrigen Mists, when that threatened basically a war between the Inhumans and the mutants. I mean, granted, there were others who were kind of trying to puzzle it out before her, and succeeding at least somewhat in that, but it was really Moon Girl that made the destruction of the Mists possible in the short time the heroes had left to rectify the conflict between the two sides. And while her instantly fixing Forge's work may have irked a lot of comic book fans, I will say it did show just how brilliant Moon Girl is, because Forge is literally one of the best inventors that we have at Marvel Comics in terms of his intellect and his know-how, so that just goes to show you basically how cool Moon Girl is. I don't really see it as a downside, but I understand. I love Forge too, so it is a little oh, my heart.
And at 7, Spider-Man. No matter what Spider-Man or Spider-Person you're referring to, none of them will ever be stopped in the grand scheme of things, alright? Not only is Peter alone an insanely resilient individual, but that's part of the whole Spider-Person identity. Getting back up no matter how many times you get knocked down or no matter how hard you hit the mat. Which is why Spider-Man is Marvel's most popular character, or well, one of the reasons. Which is yet another reason why he's unstoppable. Because why would Marvel end a character that is just making them mad bank? Spider-Man's introduction in essence resurrected the MCU in a time where people thought that Civil War was going to be lame, and now, seemingly, the driving force behind it, since the majority of the OGs have retired or were killed, or sacrificed themselves, or whatever. Spider-Man is a powerhouse in a ton of industries, and that plot armor is going to be more powerful than anything Tony Stark could ever make for him. Cosmic Spider-Man was awesome, and something I want to cosplay, but the plot armor is truly the most powerful version of this character. Plus, the whole thing where he has to actively pull his punches, otherwise, you know, we'll have a whole Andrew Garfield situation. And then when he threatened the Kingpin, because, you know, if things had gone another way, nobody would have been able to stop him. He would have just I would have liked to see that though.
Number 6. Colossus. I mean, it's literally in Colossus's name at one point, hence why he has to make our cut and why he takes one of our top spots. Colossus is known for being the unstoppable Colossus in Marvel's Contest of Champions, but also in the comics during the Fear Itself event when he became the Avatar of Sidorak for a time, replacing Cain Marko. In fact, whenever Colossus is the Avatar of Sidorak, that's what we call him, Unstoppable Colossus, because Juggernaut is Unstoppable Juggernaut. And if you have his card in Marvel Snap, it is easy to see why we consider him to be so unstoppable just in general. Sorry, I'm obsessed with Marvel Snap lately, so it's probably going to be mentioned now and then in our videos. Even though we are not sponsored by Marvel Snap, to be clear, but we should be. I love that game. In Snap, Colossus's card ability is an ongoing. He cannot be moved, destroyed, or have his power reduced. And he comes by this card ability honestly, as even in the comics, Colossus is known for being an unstoppable force.
5. Phoenix Force Spider-Man. Okay, so this is a slightly more confusing pick for this list. Most fans of Marvel Comics know that the Phoenix Force is an incredibly powerful entity within the universe, essentially the embodiment of life itself. Many characters have played the role of host for the Phoenix Force, and not always with the best outcomes. But Spider-Man wielding the immense power of the Phoenix Force first appeared in a comic in Spider-Man number 25 in 1990. Now unfortunately though, this was later revealed to just be an illusion. But since it was so incredibly awesome to see, it inspired another appearance. However, this time it was taken by a video game. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, which actually saw Peter Parker wielding the Phoenix Force with real Phoenix Force powers. It's not comic books, but it happened, so it's kinda cool. Number 4. Cosmic Spider-Man. There was a point in time when Peter Parker of Earth 616 absorbed the Enigma Force and became the most powerful version of Spider-Man we have ever even seen. Even capable of punching the Hulk into orbit. Now in the mainline continuity he doesn't have it for very long, but on Earth 13 he kept the powers and became the hero Captain Universe. So this Peter Parker has all the usual Spider-Man powers, but also now has cosmic awareness, energy manipulation giving him energy blasts and flight. He can manipulate matter, making his webs as strong as adamantium or even changing their shape altogether. He has fought and wiped the floor with some truly strong foes like Thor, Graviton, and of course the Hulk, and he never truly hit his upper limit of strength and power, even when he cleaned up all the oceans and threw all the Earth's trash into the sun. His universe became a safe haven for all the Spider-Men and Spider-Women in the multiverse when the Inheritors were hunting them down, because Captain Universe could defeat them, and his cosmic powers are gone when he leaves this dimension. Now unfortunately, he is consumed by Solus, who was allowed to get a hold of him and used his powers against him in Amazing Spider-Man number 11 in 2014, but if we don't think about that, we just look at all the other stuff, pretty powerful. Pretty unstoppable. Number 3. Cosmic Comic Spider-Man. Now look, I've talked about this version of Spider-Man a few times, and I'm sorry if it's getting old, but nah, it's cool. The comic he appears in is actually just a guide on how to read comic books, and through the course of the story, it basically becomes a love letter to comic books themselves. It's really good if you love comic books, you should definitely check it out. In How to Read Comics the Marvel Way, issues 1 to 4, the comic itself becomes a character, and it starts off trying to teach the reader how exactly to read comics. The comic follows Spider-Man in a conflict with Mysterio, who found the Cosmic Comic, the same one speaking to us in the basement of the Natural History History Museum. It allowed Mysterio to freeze Spider-Man in time in a comic panel, turn inanimate objects to life, and increase his size. Now, after causing more problems by tearing the comic book in half, Peter Parker eventually learns that he himself is a comic book character. He can see all of time laid out as a comic panel. He trapped Mysterio in an airline passenger safety card, which is essentially a comic book if you think about it, and then he pulled him out of that comic. He created comic book shops to combat the dip in popularity of comics themselves, and he even breaks the fourth wall and begins to talk to the reader. Essentially, Spider-Man temporarily had control over comic books themselves, which if you think about it, is similar to, but even more powerful than the ability of a comic book character to warp reality. Number 2, Power of Love Spider-Man. Okay, so this isn't really an alternate version of Spider-Man. This is still 616 Peter, but merged with the nexus of all realities, gaining enough power to fight the Outrider. The story is actually a little difficult to follow and understand. It took me some time, so it may be because I'm just lacking in brain cells, or it may be that it's all very convoluted and the art isn't exactly clear. So, if I get any information here wrong, feel free to correct me, please. But as for the power Spider-Man possesses here, he doesn't actually do much, aside from facing Outrider, that is, if you consider not doing much as destroying and recreating multiple different universes in order to save all of creation. So he does a lot. And that sentence alone does kind of speak volumes about the power that Spider-Man possessed for a little while. The story is in Peter Parker's Spider-Man Annual #1, and you should definitely check it out so that you can figure out everything I just said, because I think I messed it up. Number 1, Beyonder Spider-Man. For this point, we are talking about regular old Peter Parker from Spider-Man and Secret Wars #4, when he temporarily gains the powers of the Beyonder. Now, before Dr. Doom was granted the Beyonder's powers in Secret War, the Beyonder power actually went to 2 others. Once the power left the Beyonder himself, it actually went straight to Wolverine, who absolutely could not handle the power at all, so he almost immediately bestowed it onto Spider-Man. With this power, Spider-Man turns Doc Ock into plants, he obliterates a big group of villains, easily rips apart Ultron, literally stomps on the Molecule Man, and defeats Galactus with his fists. He brings a city from the 32nd century into the modern day, creating a new Parker City. He saves Uncle Ben on like 3 separate occasions, just bringing him back to life, like through reality. But then we learn that all this happened in like 1/100000th of a second before Dr. Doom took the power back for himself, which is the way it ended up being and was supposed to be the whole way.
Number 10, Iron Man. I mean, Tony is just a man, but he is still a very determined man, and he's willing to put everything on the line when it comes to saving the day or fighting for what he believes in. A few examples of this can be seen from both the comics and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man ends up being the one to wear the Infinity Gauntlet, snapping to defeat Thanos as the heroes make their final stand. He knows he won't survive this, but it's up to him in the end to save the day, and he's willing to give his life to stop Thanos and prevent him from once more erasing 50% of the universe's population with a snap. During Civil War in the comics, Iron Man also exhibits how committed he can be to a cause, when he believes the best way to prevent civilian casualties is by basically reining in superheroes, having them register and in essence work for the government. His beliefs are so strong that while other heroes disagree with his methods, he is willing to go to war over it, starting the first civil war against the superheroes that disagree, who are led by a man who believes in freedom among all else and knows all too well what it's like to be a government pawn. Captain America's Steven Rogers. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here at Top 10 Nerd and you need more Marvel content in your life, be sure to check out our Top 10 Marvel playlist for that. Number 9, Doctor Strange. Even when Doctor Strange died, he didn't let that defeat him. In Death of Doctor Strange, Strange comes back to investigate his own death and solve his own murder. Well, a version of him does anyways. And the amazing thing is that he also seems to have left clues for his alternate self to solve the murder. In the end, when Clea attempts to call him back before accepting the role of Sorcerer Supreme as Doctor Strange's wife, Strange, however, says he cannot return because he knows what it will cost, and that it breaks basically laws of magic. Despite the fact that Strange is a hero who gets things done, he has also learned how to be unstoppably loyal to the rules of magic. This is probably because he is known to have broken these rules on a few occasions to varying degrees of success, I'd say. Sometimes it works, other times doing so only creates more problems, as we also see in Doctor Strange's journey in regards to his MCU stories and counterparts. In the MCU, Strange was willing to break some rules to help Peter get into school by making the world forget that he was actually Spider-Man. But due to Peter's constant add-ons in regards to who was actually allowed to remember, Strange lost control of that spell, splitting a crack in the multiverse. But alternatively, when facing off against the Scarlet Witch, he did allow himself to use an alternate copy of the Darkhold to dreamwalk in his own alternate universe's corpse, breaking several rules in order to defeat Wanda. Then again, he probably knew, like, this is like, I gotta break some rules here. I'm hoping it'll all work out in the end. I mean, I think Strange knew, like, I could do this and it'll be worth it. Number 8. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers' whole motto is basically about being unstoppable. Higher, further, faster, baby. Well, it's about being unstoppable and of course, flying. Carol loves to fly. Even when an alternate version of her shows up on God Emperor Doom's battle world during Secret Wars, where she is given a life that she should seemingly love, this version of Carol becomes suspicious of Doom and ends up rebelling, questioning if what he tells her about the sky is actually true. This lines up perfectly with the type of hero Carol is in the main reality as well. During Secret Wars, the Captain Marvel of Earth 616 was one of the heroes on the life raft who had been preserved to the end of the multiverse and rebelled as well against Doom to try and reset the multiverse back to normal. Which happens after Reed gets control of the Beyonders' powers, winning them back in a battle against Doom and using them along with the help from his family to rebuild the Marvel multiverse. Aside from that, Carol in the main continuity has also lost her memories multiple times and even died and been resurrected, and she hasn't ever let any of that stop her from doing what needs to be done in terms of heroics. Captain Marvel also happens to be one of the most powerful superheroes out there in Marvel Comics. She's got a ton of combat experience, military experience, pilot experience, and can survive in the vacuum of space. Number 7. Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is one of the Superman-like characters that Marvel has to offer us. In fact, I would argue of the characters that we have in that category that are like DC Superman, he is one of the most underrated and often understated for how powerful he truly is. Adam Brashear, as he is known, is actually powered by antimatter, in essence becoming a living, breathing antimatter or negative reactor. The antimatter that he harnesses comes from the negative zone, which is why we might refer to him as a negative reactor as an alternate to an antimatter reactor. But he isn't a negative character, just the opposite. He is an amazingly powerful positive character, a superhero. Blue Marvel got his powers way back in the day and has actually been an active hero since the 60s in terms of the comics inner timeline. However, he didn't end up staying as one throughout his history due to the fact that he was black, with President John F. Kennedy heartbreakingly even asking him to retire from heroics because tensions were running high and America just wasn't ready for a black superhero at that time. Fortunately, they're ready now. Which is also great because we need a hero like Blue Marvel who isn't just unstoppable because of his nigh invulnerability, strength, and ability to manipulate energy, but also because he happens to be a super genius as well. And while some might take his temporary retirement as Blue Marvel giving up, really he was more just biding his time. A decade later, he would once again return to heroics, joining the mighty Avengers of the 1970s. So he also wasn't out for really that long, fortunately. Number 6. Namor. While some might have more power than Namor behind their mighty fists, I would argue that Namor tends to be even more stubborn and determined a lot of the time. He isn't one to back down, and generally a good speech doesn't really cut it for making him stop whatever it is he's doing. Although he also probably wouldn't attack mutant kind since, you know, he is a mutant. But then again, if mutant kind did something to harm Atlantis, he might. Namor is a mutant, but first and foremost he is a ruler, believing in fighting for his people and their underwater nation. Case in point, when Krakoa first emerged and he was actually approached to join and acknowledge the country, but he decided to reject their offer to join the nation as a mutant. Although I imagine Atlantis would still recognize Krakoa, but I can't remember for certain if that's been mentioned in anything that I've read. Let me know in the comments if you know if Atlantis has acknowledged Krakoa yet. Namor is also in his own right a powerhouse, and while he might not be as well known for his strength as someone say like the Hulk, he also has shared a place on the Defenders team, with him proving how undeniably powerful he is to have earned that place. In fact, the Defenders remains one of the most powerful teams at Marvel, so typically anyone who makes the cut should be considered pretty OP.
Number 5. Days of Future Past. Wolverine in the Days of Future Past storyline comes from a future world that has become apocalyptic because of the Sentinels, which basically eradicated mutants by the thousands and ended up enslaving the planet, both mutant and humankind alike. Now Wolverine, who in this future is older and by extension more experienced, is a more powerful version of his 616 counterpart. He still has all the powers of the regular Wolverine, but he just works a lot smarter. Unfortunately, he still ends up passing when a Sentinel destroys him, leaving only his adamantium skeleton behind. But thanks to comics being comics, this version is revived and appears again much later on in Earth X. X, standing in for this Earth's Wolverine, who had finally married and settled down with Jean Grey, which I think makes him more powerful, but he also really settled, grew a rather large gut, and seems to have completely distanced himself from his former self. Jean also abandons her former life and is now an out-of-shape housewife chasing after their kids and resenting her choice to marry Logan. So yes, Days of Future Past Logan was needed here for sure. Number 4, Old Man Logan. In the alternate universe where we are introduced to Old Man Logan and Old Man Hawkeye, everything is in shambles. It's an apocalyptic wasteland, and all because the villains, under the leadership of the Red Skull, had coordinated a massive attack on the world's superheroes, leaving only a very few alive. Logan himself was tricked into wiping out every single member of the X-Men, and while that is tragic, I do have to say that's incredibly impressive. Like, damn. Impressive or not, it drove Logan mad with grief and he vowed to become a pacifist. He retired to a quiet farming family life, letting the world go to hell around him, but we need a story, so that can't fly. Eventually, being short on money and needing to help his family, he joins Hawkeye on an adventure across America to deliver a briefcase of super soldier serum. After he goes on this grand adventure, defeats the Red Skull, and returns home, the Hulk gang has decimated his family. This is when he finally pops his claws for the first time since the story began, and ooh, it's satisfying. He wipes out the entire gang and eviscerates the Hulk himself, and then eventually finds his way to the main Marvel universe. Another version of him even gets the powers of Venom as well. So cool. Number 3, The Void. I think one of my favorite things that Marvel's done is create the Sentry. Essentially a Superman-like character, but like, in my opinion, way cooler. A large part of what makes him so much better is that while he is essentially a godlike superhero who inspired all the other heroes who exist, he also has a dark persona called the Void. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1 million people and almost destroyed Manhattan. And so, Sentry made the decision with other heroes like Reed Richards and Doctor Strange to cause the entire world to forget about his existence. Now, in New Avengers, which started in 2004/2005, the Sentry comes back to the world, and through a series of events, the Void also returns. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a damn thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it, in classic supervillain fashion, vowed to come back. And it totally did. In the Siege event, Norman Osborn decided to attack Asgard, and he used the Sentry to do this. Problem is that the Sentry ended up unleashing the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. This did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off into the universe to basically do the same thing. The Void exists as long as the Sentry exists, and the Sentry keeps on coming back to life every time he somehow gets defeated. The Sentry is basically a god, and the Void is this god's devil. Number 2, Zom. Just because Zom looks like your uncle's hairy big toe does not mean that you should underestimate him. Zom is one of the most powerful and scary extra-dimensional entities in existence, being described as worse than a dozen Umars. Umar is the sister of Dormammu, for anyone who wanted to know. Now, speaking of Dormammu, it took all of his power plus the help of the cosmic being Eternity just to restrain Zom with the magical chain called the Links of Living Bondage and with an object called the Crown of Blindness. And with these tools, these massively powerful beings managed to trap Zom in a jar. Now, I know it sounds silly, I'm downplaying it. It was actually an amphora, and Zom was trapped in a quote world beyond worlds in a quote time beyond all time. That was just his origin story though. Eons into the future, in Strange Tales number 156 from 1967, Doctor Strange unleashed Zom in a fight against Umar, but that was a mistake because now Strange had no way of taking on Zom, like at all. He had to turn to the Living Tribunal, the personification of multiversal law, the representative for the one above all, and the highest authority in the multiverse, just to banish Zom. Zom wasn't really released again, but Strange did channel Zom's power in a fight against Worldbreaker Hulk when that event happened, and using that power he did indeed pummel the hell out of the Hulk until Strange started to lose control and pass out. Lastly, in Doctor Strange's final recent moments, he was was taken down by the Hood, who held an assault on the Sanctum Sanctorum with like 50 other villains, and Strange managed to rise again, but channeling the power of Zom, which he used to take out everyone. Then Strange left the mortal plane.
Number 1. The One Below All. So, the One Above All is the ruler of the multiverse and the creator of all life in it. Although he is the source of love and good, he also has an evil form known as the One Below All, who is the personification of hatred and destruction. The ruler of the lowest point of reality, the Below Place, it is able to manifest itself on Earth through the mutagenic form of gamma radiation. This means that when Bruce Banner was caught in the gamma bomb, he was infused with this dark entity's power. The One Below All wants to become the only remaining thing in the multiverse and to destroy everything else. As he is incapable of having his own personality without a host, it waited until Hulk's father, Brian Banner, died to merge with him and take on his personality. The leader eventually managed to absorb Brian's soul in hopes of learning more about the One Below All, but was possessed by it instead. He is a terrifying foe who can never really be killed, and who, as a dark aspect of the One Above All, is technically also the creator of everything he's trying to destroy. If you want more information on the One Below All, check out our video attempting to explain the Immortal Hulk, where he is the puppet master pulling all the strings against the Green Goliath.
Number 10. Swordsman. When the world's heroes gave up their lives in order to destroy the villain Onslaught, what they didn't know is that Franklin Richards had subconsciously created a pocket universe to save everyone. No one knew of this, and they spent an entire year on this counter-Earth reliving their new lives as heroes reborn, because that was the name of the comic. One of these heroes that seemed to be native to this pocket universe was a guy by the name of Swordsman. Swordsman was a member of the Avengers, and he was with them in their fights with Loki, Kang, and the Hulk, and eventually he became the last Avenger when the other Avengers went back to Earth 616. Now sadly, Swordsman ended up getting cancer, and in an effort to keep the world safe, he created a new team of heroes called the Remnants, leading them under his new name, Deadpool. Unfortunately, he had to retire from superheroing because of the cancer, but then, in a sudden twist, Deadpool/Swordsman learns that his entire reality and everyone in it is actually just the fabrication of a young boy named Franklin, and he goes absolutely mad and wants to destroy the entire dimension. He steals a SHIELD helicarrier filled with nuclear boom booms, and then launches all of them at the Watcher's Citadel on the moon, riding one of them along the way. Turns out he actually creates a tear in space and time and meets an evil core of Deadpool's, and he joins up. Number 9. Kidpool. I am putting Kidpool on this list for pretty much one reason. 2 words. Lightsabers. Technically, it's 1 word, just let me live. Anyone who wields a lightsaber is automatically just better, okay? And when that person is a pre-puberty Wade Wilson, and he wields not just 1, but 2 lightsabers, is beautiful. Hailing from Earth 10330, Wade Wilson was a new student of the Xavier Orphanage for Troubled Boys, and he really was a troubled boy. Unfortunately, this means he was a little bit of a loner. He got put in detention with a kid version of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and so Wade and Scott decided to team up and escape from detention and go crash the prom so Scott could be with Jean Grey. At the prom, Wade ended up getting into a battle of fisticuffs with the kid-sized version of Logan, aka Wolverine, and the fight made the prom come to a halt and saw Kidpool get embarrassed in front of all the other kids. So he decided to leave, but just when that happened, he was confronted by 616 Deadpool and joined up with his good guy Deadpool Core. Number 8. Hulkpool. Hulked Out Heroes is a nice, sweet little 2-issue comic that is honestly just the best. Basically, MODOK and the leader had gamma mutated a few pretty powerful heroes like Thor and the Thing and Wolverine and a whole bunch of them, and that on its own is dope. But they also gamma mutated Deadpool so that he is now Hulkpool, and he and Bob decide to head off to do their own thing. They head to Thunder's base and use her time machinery, and Bob sends Hulkpool back through time with the intention of crushing his normal weak Deadpool self. Because, I don't know, I guess paradoxes don't exist here. Instead, Bob accidentally sends Hulkpool on a trip through time, starting in 1717 on board a pirate ship where Ben Grimm, the Thing, has taken on the role of Blackbeard. Hulkpool joins him as his first mate, and they face off against a giant squid until Bob sends them back even further and they come face to face with Devil Dinosaur. After that whole chaotic journey, all three of them are time displaced to the Wild West where, of all people, they run into Hawkeye. Hulkpool travels again, but this time he ends up at the exact moment when Captain America and Bucky Barnes are in the process of completing the mission where Bucky tragically passes away, quote unquote, because we know what actually happens. And Hulkpool stops the whole thing from happening in the first place. Not only that, but he helps Cap take down the Red Skull and Germany's leader in one go. Not bad. He stops Matt Murdock from getting covered in toxic waste, Doctor Strange from getting in his car crash, the Fantastic Four from going to space, Donald Blake from becoming Thor, Peter Parker from being bit by a spider, Tony Stark from being taken hostage, and Bruce Banner from being gamma irradiated. All before he finally faces himself from the day before, only to find out that he's created a whole new timeline and that Pirate Ben Grimm became the first president of the United States, and Bob is hailed as a god. Number 7. Venompool. Venompool hails from Earth 90211 from a reality stuck in the 1980s. In the story, the Beyonder decided to live the life of the party, and Spider-Man is still bonded with the Venom symbiote. Well, when Deadpool is hired by Galactus to kill the Beyonder, Deadpool tracked down his target to a nightclub, but found he was enticed into the Beyonder's partying lifestyle, getting Jerry curls in the process. While hanging out with the Beyonder in a flying limousine, because of course, Spider-Man breaks into the car out of nowhere and demands Beyonder remove the symbiote costume from him. In a freak moment, Spider-Man is attacked by the limo driver, and the symbiote ends up bonding with Deadpool instead. After a while, the Beyonder got sick of the Deadpool/symbiote amalgamation and ditches him, which, you can imagine, didn't sit very well with Venompool. He ends up going back to his mission and tries to bring down the Beyonder with a weapon called the Recton Expungifier. There's a lot to this story, but I don't want to rob you the satisfaction of reading it yourself, so we're moving on. Number 6. Gwenpool. Gwenpool came from a universe a lot like ours, meaning superheroes were all fictional characters in her world with origins and stories printed in comic books. Well, Gwen was obsessed with them. Thanks to a series of events, when she wound up in the Marvel Universe, she put on a costume and became a mercenary as Gwenpool. Gwen is a regular human, but she knew all this was fictional inside a comic book, which allows her to completely break the fourth wall, which has helped her snag victories on multiple occasions, not to mention the fact that she knows everything about pretty much every hero. Her knowledge that everything is in a comic book also allows her to completely detach from anyone she is hired to take down, making her a pretty effective merc. Despite that, Gwen has grown to care for the people that inhabit her adopted universe, though she continues to believe that she is a fictional character in a comic book. Gwen's chief enemy is MODOK, the mental organism designed only for killing. Gwen was part of MODOK's mercenary group for a short time until the boss realized that Gwen possessed no actual skills at all, making him pretty peed off. Gwenpool is awesome, and she has the ability to bring people into the space between comic panels, which is just a level of meta that I'm not ready for right now. At number 5 is Carol Danvers. Whether you love or hate Carol Danvers, there is no denying this energy-wielding superhero is an absolute powerhouse. Carol was the head of security at NASA when she was accidentally subjected to the Psyche Magnetron machine, which imprinted her with energy from Mar-Vell's Kree negabands. This basically means she was given superhuman strength that allowed her to support the weight of a dead celestial, super stamina that lets her exert herself for 24 hours before getting tired, superhuman durability to withstand planet-destroying explosions, superhuman agility and reflexes that are next to instant, a regenerative healing factor that exceeds Wolverine's and can be extended to others, self-propelled flight at 3 times the speed of sound, even in the vacuum of space, and flash precognition that allows her to randomly subconsciously anticipate the moves of her opponents. But all of this is somewhat secondary to what is arguably her main power, the ability to control, absorb, and manipulate energy of a whole bunch of different kinds. This extends to let her project her spirit, manipulate molecules, and transmute matter. She can create energy constructs and even boost up her already OP abilities. And at number 4 is the Hulk. It's almost a requirement that the Hulk show up on this list. The gamma-powered Green Goliath has been around for a long time, and ever since he showed up, there are only a small handful of people who have ever been able to stop him without using some kind of magic or reality warping. His infinite strength has a lot to do with that. A strength that grows based on his anger and has never ever really reached a cap, allowing him to destroy entire planets, be a threat to entire galaxies, and being able to shake the multiverse with his punches. It also has a lot to do with his basically limitless dynamic durability, which has allowed him to survive attacks from enchanted weapons, powerful blasts of energy, stronger than ground zero nuclear explosions, the Human Torch's Nova Blast, and he could stand up to forces that could crush adamantium and destroy entire planets. But now, thanks to Immortal Hulk, we know that the Hulk actually literally cannot die, coming back from the below place through green doors. Actually, in that story we even get to see an alternate future where the One Below All uses the Hulk to destroy literally everything in existence. And the Hulk is still showing more and more of his potential, with the reveal of the Titan personality that was able to fire energy blasts and is utter nightmare fuel. And at number 3 is the Scarlet Witch. As a natural conduit of one of the most powerful forms of dark magic, chaos magic, the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, is one of the most terrifyingly powerful beings in Marvel Comics. Using her chaos magic, Wanda has the very powerful ability to alter reality, which she has used to create her own children, bring the Avengers to their knees and even completely end a few of them, and even rewrite all of reality to make mutants the dominant species for a while before wiping a ton of them out. When she was born, Wanda had a natural affinity for magic. Now this was boosted up by the gift or curse of chaos magic given to her by Chthon, the old god of chaos, which was then boosted up again by the experiments of the High Evolutionary at Wundagore Mountain, which gave her an even deeper connection to magic. She can channel energy from other dimensions and from entities like Chthon, Sidorak, and Morrigan, and is considered to be the nexus being of the universe. Most magic users could make this list, but few of them can do what the Scarlet Witch can do. And at number 2 is Thor. Thor, Odin's son, the Asgardian god of thunder, is one of the most powerful heroes on the Avengers roster. Whenever anyone talks about Avengers level threats, one of the key elements of that is whether Thor can handle the situation alone. In both the comics and the MCU, Thor and the Hulk are repeatedly given reasons to not be able to show up so that certain storylines can actually be compelling. Specifically, I'm talking about Civil War, where Thor had to deal with Ragnarok back home on Asgard, and that was all because if he was on Earth during Civil War, whoever had him on their side would automatically win. Being the son of Odin the Allfather and Gaia, an old god, Thor has all the incredible powers of the Asgardians, but boosted to a whole other level thanks to his mom. As the god of strength as well as thunder, he is one of the strongest Marvel characters, being able to either defeat or stalemate astronomically strong beings like the Midgard Serpent, the Hulk, the Silver Surfer, Gladiator, and Hercules. His stamina lets him basically fight forever, and he's next to completely invulnerable. Not to mention his weather and energy manipulation and the use of his hammer. Even when he isn't in the possession of his hammer though, and is just Thor Odin's son, he is still a force to be reckoned with, and, especially recently, he keeps getting more and more power boosts, like when he was Rune King Thor, or now that he's Allfather Thor, which gives him the Thor Force, and he's gone even beyond that when he became the Herald of Galactus. There's a lot more to Thor, but I think I've said enough. And finally, in at number 1 is the Sentry. With the power of a million exploding suns, Robert Reynolds, the Sentry, is not just another Marvel version of Superman. In my opinion, he is even cooler than Superman, and you can get at me in the comments for that. The Golden Sentry Serum gave Robert Reynolds more than just the highest level of strength in the universe, the ability to move and fly faster than the speed of light or just straight up teleport, and near invulnerability. The Sentry also has molecular manipulation abilities that have allowed him to defeat the Molecule Man, photokinesis, which allows him to shine brighter than the sun, turn completely invisible, and produce blasts of light from his hands and eyes that could burn the Hulk's skin and level whole city blocks. He also has psionic abilities that he uses to hold himself together, implant his memories in others, erase memories, and stop the Hammer of Thor. He also has biokinesis abilities that have let him heal others, resurrect himself, reconstitute his molecules, and as the Void, give others cancer. Speaking of the Void, that is a whole other dark side to this hero that is intrinsically tied to his existence, which is not only incredibly powerful in its own right and makes the hero 10 times more interesting, but when the Sentry combined with the Void, this godlike being somehow got a huge power boost. Number 10, Spider-Man Punisher. On Earth 71928, location of the What If Peter Parker Became the Punisher story, Peter's life remained pretty much the same as Earth 616 Peter, that is, until the night Uncle Ben's life was drawn to a close. Instead of following the classic story, Peter caught and dispatched the killer using the same weapon that took his uncle's life. Now Peter tried to avoid going full murderous Punisher at first, trying to go his normal route, but since criminals are criminals and they always come back, and he knows how much more permanent of a solution it is to just take them out, he went full force into that lifestyle. He carried the blam blam that took his Uncle Ben's life, as well as other weaponry with multiple different types of ammunition that allowed him to take down the Sinister Six with ease, and he was even able to save Gwen Stacy. Going by Punisher Spider, his suit also took a skull logo instead of the traditional spider logo due to the fact that the spider that gave him his powers was a noble false widow, which has a cephalothorax that looks like a skull, and it's not because he wanted to look like the Punisher. I promise. Number 9, Spider-Man 2099. Miguel O'Hara. Instead of getting bitten, Miguel's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly addicted to a future substance by his employer. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil, but further straying from the 616 Peter Parker, Miguel has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed as well as telepathic communication abilities. His webs are also organic, which differs from Spider-Man's web shooters, and he also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat. But on top of all those powers, Miguel is from the year 2099. Which means obviously that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal, mainly focusing around his suit, which is incredibly durable and has an artificial intelligence, which is just cool. Number 8, Spider's Man. In Spider-Geddon number 3 of 2018, we are introduced to Spider's Man, which is a colony of thousands of radioactively powered spiders who, in a moment of absolute horror, consumed a high school boy by the name of, let me just check my notes here. Oh, Peter Parker, when he fell into their enclosure at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter, something strange happened. Instead of the spiders just going about their lives, the whole gaggle of spiders gained a sort of hive mind, and they took on the form of Peter himself and began fighting crime in the aptly named Cruel York of Earth 11580. Now, other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or if they're hungry for power, devour them whole, and it's incredibly hard to actually de-life this version of Spider-Man, as even a single spider of the thousands who make up this being survives. It means that technically, Spider's Man is also still alive, and it can and will eventually multiply to rebuild itself. Himself? Their self? One of those. You know what I'm saying. Number 7, Poison. One never truly forgets their first love. And that's apparently true for formless, tar-like, brain-eating aliens too. Ever since the first time Venom and Spider-Man bonded together, that pesky symbiote would continuously try to merge with Peter Parker, but he would only get about halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Venom finally gets what he wants? In the What If Spider-Man the Other story, we get to find out. After Peter is semi-defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he's offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God. But instead of allowing this like he does in the normal continuity, Peter refuses and is instead stuck inside of his cocoon like half alive. Now you cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses the vulnerability of his soulmate and completely ditches his current host, Mac Gargan, and he goes to intercept Peter's body. And after months and months of struggling inside the cocoon, monstrously breaking down Peter Parker, Venom fully bonds to Peter. Now, the pair are truly one, which is something Venom always wanted, with all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, which include being able to replicate itself and host more than one body. He can also produce stingers that are strong enough to pierce Luke Cage's skin, which is insane, and the newly dubbed being known as Poison was even able to resurrect Gwen Stacy in a form that seems to take after Venom's offspring Carnage, although I'm not too sure about that one. Number 6, the Amazing Spider. It appears that Uncle Ben leaving this plane of existence is actually a really good thing. Hear me out. See, on Earth 11638, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new Spider-Man powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Now things aren't all hunky-dory though, as you can probably guess. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of himself to this reality where he absorbs their powers to increase his own, making him the most powerful hero on the Earth and eliminating the need for any other superhero. See, that did take a very dark turn. But when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616, this powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to Hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. Now that's not the Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider, but a Ghost Rider Spider, which is just fun to say, and that's what I'm gonna go with. Ghost Rider, for any who don't know, is insanely powerful. He has been called in to deal with the Hulk and has even gone toe-to-toe with Galactus. So, this Spider-Man Ghost Rider, or Spider Ghost Rider, which I said I was gonna call him, I'm getting mixed up with words now, is no joke. He's no joke at all. Plus, he looks really cool.
Halfway through into number 5, Archie Andrews. Okay, whoa. Hold on. Before you start raging at me in the comments, just please hear me out. I doubt anyone actually listened to that, but you know what? You may think that this is ridiculous and that I'm just trying to be a shit disturber. And while that is one of my favorite pastimes, Archie and the gang have actually been canon in the Marvel Comics since June of 1994. Archie Meets the Punisher is a one-shot comic and intercompany crossover written by Bat and Lash, and it was published jointly by Archie Comics and Marvel Comics and features the Punisher mistaking Archie Andrews for a criminal that he's been hunting. Then, when he realizes that he was wrong, he works with Archie to rescue Veronica after she had been kidnapped. And you know what? Since Archie has been a superhero multiple times in his comics, this instantly makes Archie a canon Marvel superhero. But with the comics being used as a plot device as well in Riverdale Season 6 to explain their multiverse, well, those would also by proxy be canon, meaning that Archie, being another Marvel Superman but with a weakness to palladium instead of to kryptonite, is a thing. Until they got rid of his weakness. Yeah, that was also a thing. Yeah, that's a pretty unstoppable hero if you ask me. Yeah, he can't fly, but I mean, again, plot armor.
Number 4, Storm. On part 1 of this list, I talked about how Magneto was unstoppable after Uranos' invasion. How even after seemingly being killed, Magneto just got back up. Well, he wouldn't actually have been able to keep going if it wasn't for Storm and their weird, kinda sexy team up in their fight against Uranos. But this isn't the only time that Storm has become unstoppable. There are a few others that stick out in my memory. There is the time that she was infected by the Children of the Vault's technology, which threatened to overtake her body like a virus. This happened actually pretty recently, within the last few years. Her brush with the deadly tech left Storm comatose, temporarily, until she was revived by the combined efforts of Jean Grey and Emma Frost in their own giant-size X-Men comic, which they shared together. However, Storm was still very unwell after this and left with an estimated 1 month to live. While Krakoa has the capacity to resurrect any fallen mutants, or anyone else that they feel so inclined to bring back at this point, Storm refused to take this easy way out. She would not just lay down and surrender to death. Why? Because Storm is a badass, that's why. And also I think because she felt it undermined the value of life to do so, which she was not here for, and honestly, I want to back her up on that one. Instead, Storm attempted to fight back against the infection, venturing into the often bigger on the inside lab known as the World in her own giant-size issue in an attempt to find something that might help her. Storm and her teammates did succeed in this, separating the virus from Storm and restoring her health, and proving that even in the face of death, Storm generally refuses to back down.
Number 3, the Hulk. In the mainline Marvel Universe, the Hulk is a misunderstood creature who will go on rampages, but goes out of his his way to protect innocent people, and ultimately does more good than harm. The Ultimate Hulk is a bit different. In this universe, Bruce Banner grew up hating his scrawny body, and was working to develop a new version of the Super Soldier Serum, which he tested on himself, transforming him into the Hulk. This Hulk causes a lot more collateral damage than his 616 version, routinely causing hundreds of deaths when rampaging through cities. He is also known for eating people that he doesn't like. He did a few heroic acts, but on the whole, he has done a lot more harm with his frequent rampages and his eventual team up with the villainous Maker to fight the Ultimates, the 1610 version of the Avengers. Like the classic Hulk, there are very few characters who can stand up to Hulk, and even if they do, his healing factor is so efficient that any injuries will soon be healed. If that wasn't intimidating enough, there was a time where this evil Hulk stole the Infinity Gems and used them to fight the heroes. So Hulk with an Infinity Gauntlet. Yikes. Number 2, the Green Goblin. This is the villain that got one of the biggest makeovers in the Ultimate Universe. Norman Osborn was trying to develop a super soldier serum, which he called the Oz formula. After an Oz-infected spider bit Peter Parker and gave him spider powers, Norman theorized that since the Oz and spider DNA had made Peter the way he was, injecting himself with Oz mixed with his own DNA would turn him into a heightened version of himself. Instead, it turned him into a hideous giant goblin creature. While the 616 goblin has super strength and uses a glider with pumpkin bombs, this goblin had insane super strength as well as fortified tissues that made him very difficult to hurt. He had a powerful healing factor and could launch fiery bolts of energy from his hands. True, Spider-Man would often foil his plans and he was presumed dead several times, but his real ace in the hole is that the Oz formula made him immortal, so he would always return to life. So, even if you could stop him, it would never be long before he returned for revenge. Number 1, the Maker. Reed Richards is often called the smartest man alive in the Marvel Universe, and alongside the Fantastic Four, is one of Earth's greatest heroes. His ego has often led to him making some questionable decisions, but he has been instrumental in saving the Earth from several threats, including Galactus and the Skrull. Despite his heroics, we did witness a spectacular fall from grace for Reed in the Ultimate Comics universe, where the combined stress of the Fantastic Four breaking up and Sue Storm rejecting his marriage proposal caused Reed to snap and blow up his childhood home to fake his death, killing his family in the process. He went on to use aliens under his control to attack the heroes. He was eventually defeated and disfigured by the Human Torch and flung into the negative zone. But Reed returned to Earth and took on the identity of the Maker, and set out on a twisted quest to make the world perfect. He killed all the Asgardians in an attempt to understand Thor's power, and used an antimatter attack on Washington, D.C., killing POTUS, his cabinet, and all of Congress. The Maker went on to do a lot of twisted stuff, fighting the heroes of his own Earth as well as the heroes of Earth 616, showing just how dangerous Reed Richards can be when his massive brain is turned against Marvel's heroes. He is the ultimate threat to the Ultimate Universe, and just as dangerous to the 616 universe.